Hello everyone, I am the storyteller and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching? Now get comfortable and relax. It was past midnight and I was alone on a narrow, unpaved road somewhere in the countryside. My headlights were the only source of light, and the fields on both sides were mostly dark. The sky had no stars that I could see. I had been driving for hours and felt tired. I wanted to be home, but home was still far. I tried not to think about how isolated I was out there. Then I saw something. There was a figure on the side of the road ahead, crouched near a patch of weeds. The figure's eyes caught my headlights and glowed in a strange way, like two small bright points. I thought it might be an animal, maybe a stray dog, but it looked too upright. The thing was near the edge of the narrow dirt shoulder. I pressed my foot on the brake and the car slowed. When I realized it was shaped like a person, I jerked the wheel hard to the left. I felt the car's back end slip a little on the loose gravel. I managed not to hit it, but I lost control for a few seconds. The car ended up half-turned, engine still running, headlights shining across the empty field. I let out a shaky breath. The figure was behind me now. I wanted to look for it in the mirror, but I decided to check the front first. My bumper had scraped something. I didn't trust the car not to have some damage. I hated the idea of popping the hood in the dark, but I felt I had to. I also wanted to confirm what I had seen. I pulled the parking brake and stepped outside. The night air was cold and I smelled damp earth. There was gravel under my boots, my shoulders felt tight. I heard no insects, no rustling from the fields. I saw my car's headlights throwing weak light into the distance. The beam showed empty dirt, some scattered bushes and a crooked fence far away. I turned around to face where I'd first seen the figure. In the darkness behind me, I could make out a shape. It stood near where I had swerved. It had those same bright eyes. They looked like they were reflecting light, but I didn't know what light could be reaching them now. I raised my hand to shield my eyes from the car's glare, but the figure was too far into the dark. I could only see its outline. It seemed taller now, not crouched. It stood very still. I opened the hood of my car and leaned over, shining a small flashlight I kept in the glove box. I checked my radiator, my hoses, my belts. I listened to the engine. It idled rough, but not too bad. Nothing looked seriously damaged. I just needed a moment to calm down. My heart was beating fast. My breathing felt shallow. I forced myself to breathe slower. I could feel sweat on my neck even though it was chilly. I kept glancing over my shoulder, but each time I looked away and looked back again, the figure seemed closer. Not by much, but it moved forward whenever I looked somewhere else. At first, it was at least 30 yards away. After a few glances, it stood maybe 20 yards away, then less than that. It wasn't walking right. It moved only when I wasn't looking. I never saw it step forward. It was just in a new spot each time I turned my head back. I slammed the hood shut and backed up until I felt the car's door behind me. I kept my eyes on the figure as I reached for the handle. My hand shook as I pulled the door open. I wanted to leave right away, but I also had to turn my head to get in. When I did, I saw from the corner of my eye a slight shift in the figure's position. Once inside, I locked the doors. I didn't know if that lock would matter. The figure had no visible tools, no visible weapon, just a strange posture and those eyes that caught the light. I tried to pull forward and straighten out, but I realized my front wheel was stuck in a small ditch. The car shook when I pressed the gas, but it wouldn't climb out. I put it in reverse, tried to get a little momentum, but I only managed to spin the tires. Each time I glanced in the mirror, I saw the figure a little bit closer. I tried to turn the wheel to get some angle, but the car wouldn't budge. I pounded on the steering wheel and cursed under my breath. I turned on my high beams, hoping to get a better look. The figure's head jerked away, as if bothered by the brightness. I saw more details now. The figure looked human in outline, but its clothing was hard to make out. It looked like it wore something loose. The face was unclear, but I could see pale skin where the eyes reflected the light. The eyes did not blink. The body was thin. The arms hung low. The figure's knees bent slightly inward. It was only about 10 yards away. Its chest rose and fell like it was breathing fast. I could not hear it breathe, but I saw the motion. I tried to speak. "Hey!" I yelled through the closed window. "What do you want?" There was no response. It didn't make any sound. I thought maybe it couldn't hear me. I stuck my head out the window a little and yelled again. "Do you need help?" "What's wrong?" Still nothing. The figure stood there. I pulled my head back in and kept my eyes on it while reaching down to the side of my seat. I had a tire iron under the driver's seat. I gripped it and placed it on my lap. It wasn't much, but it was something. I decided to try rocking the car out of the ditch. I turned the wheel, put the car in reverse, pressed the gas, let it roll back a bit, then forward again. The engine whined. The tires ground into the dirt. After a few tries, the car moved a few inches. I knew I had to look at the road, the mirrors, and the dashboard. Each time I looked away from the figure, I felt my chest tighten. After about 4 attempts, I managed to get the front tires onto level ground. I smiled for a second, relieved. Then I looked up. The figure was now only about 5 yards away, standing right next to my headlight beam. I saw its lower face in the light. The mouth was closed. The jaw looked rigid. The skin looked dry and pale. I put the car into drive and pressed the gas. The car did not move. I realized my rear tire was possibly caught on something. My heart pounded harder. My legs felt stiff. My arms felt weak. I pressed the gas again, harder this time. The engine revved. The car shook, and then nothing. The car didn't move. I clenched my teeth and felt sweat on my forehead. The figure was right there. I could see one of its hands now, a thin hand with long fingers. It twitched slightly. It stood completely silent. I couldn't even hear its footsteps or breathing. I left the headlights and engine on. I leaned over to the passenger side and opened the glove box. I had a small toolbox with a few items, a flashlight, some spare fuses, and a folding knife. I grabbed the knife and put it in my pocket. I had no idea what to do. If I stayed in the car, I was stuck. If I got out to check the tires, I had to take my eyes off that thing. Every time I did, it got closer. I thought I should try something different. Maybe I could back up the car more and turn around. I put the car in reverse and looked over my shoulder. I had to look away from the figure to do this. My neck hurt from tension. I tried not to blink. I stepped on the gas. The car jerked backward a little. I felt a bump. Then I turned my eyes forward again. The figure was now leaning against my driver's side window. Its eyes were bright in the reflection of my interior light. Its mouth was slightly open now. Its lips were thin and cracked. I could see its nostrils flare as if it was sniffing the air. I yelled and let go of the steering wheel for a moment. I felt my chest tighten. I scrambled to pick up the tire iron from my lap. I held it up, my arm shaking. The figure pressed a hand to the glass. I saw the palm spread out on the window. The fingers were long and thin, each fingernail a dull white. I could see the texture of its skin like rough, dry patches. I banged the tire iron against the inside of the glass. "Get away!" I yelled. It didn't even flinch. It just watched me. I could see its eyes more clearly now. They were not shining on their own. They were reflecting my interior light, creating that bright look. It was like the eyes were just extremely reflective. I couldn't guess why. I pressed the horn. The sound echoed in the quiet night. My own ears hurt from the noise in such a still place. The figure moved its head a bit, turning it to the side. Then it stepped back. I seized the chance. I slammed the car into reverse and stomped on the gas. I kept my eyes on it this time, trying to see if it moved. The car rolled backward about 10 feet and the figure stayed where it was. I turned the wheel sharply and then drove forward. The car jerked over some uneven ground, but it started to move. I pulled the wheel straight, keeping the figure in my sight the whole time. The figure started to follow, walking slowly and quietly. I had about 20 yards between us now. I could feel my neck and shoulders aching from tension. I wanted to get out of there. My plan was to find some paved road and get back to a main highway. I drove slowly forward, keeping my gaze partly on the figure and partly on the path ahead. The ground was rough, and I didn't want to blow a tire. The figure followed, but it never ran. It walked at a steady pace. I kept going, picking up a bit more speed. Eventually, I was moving fast enough that the figure became a dark shape behind me. I eased the car onto a slightly smoother patch of road. My headlights showed a bend ahead. I looked back in my rearview mirror. The figure was farther away now. It was still visible, but only just. I wondered if it would keep following indefinitely. I still felt shaky. My hands were sweaty on the steering wheel. My stomach felt tight. I tried to focus on getting away. I told myself not to think too much. Just keep driving. I kept moving for several minutes. The figure grew smaller in the mirror. The fields around me looked empty. I didn't see any farmhouse lights. I didn't hear any sounds except my engine and the gravel under my tires. After a while, I stopped seeing the figure. It was too far back, or had stopped following. I forced myself to breathe slowly and calm down. My heart still thumped hard, and my mouth felt dry. I wiped sweat from my forehead with my sleeve. The road straightened out, and I started to see a faint glow in the distance that might have been light from a main road or a distant farmhouse. I focused on reaching that light. The car seemed okay, aside from some shaky steering. I guessed the ditch hadn't done serious damage. I kept checking the mirrors. I saw no movement behind me now. I didn't want to leave the car again to check for damage. I didn't want to turn around or stop. I knew I just needed to keep moving until I found a real road and could get to a gas station or something. My mind was still stuck on that figure. I tried to push it out of my head. I felt tension in my neck and shoulders. My leg muscles were sore from pressing the pedals so hard. I turned on the radio out of habit, but there was only static. I turned it off again. After about 10 more minutes, I saw a paved road crossing ahead. It was narrow, but paved. I turned onto it and followed it until I reached a small intersection with a sign. The sign was rusted, hard to read, but I could see numbers on it. Maybe a route number. I followed that sign until I started seeing some fence posts with reflectors. Those reflectors gave me some comfort. I slowed down, rolled down my window a crack, and listened. I heard distant traffic, maybe on a bigger highway. That was all I needed. I kept going. My hands started to relax on the wheel. I took a long breath and rubbed my eyes. I felt cold air on my face. I didn't know what that figure was. I didn't know what it wanted. It hadn't attacked me. It hadn't broken into my car. It had just approached, getting closer whenever I looked away. The memory of its face was stuck in my mind. Those eyes bothered me. I tried not to think about them. I just wanted to get away from that place. I drove for at least another hour, taking turns down roads that led me toward more familiar signs. Eventually, I reached a main highway. The hum of the tires on smooth asphalt was a relief. I glanced in the rearview mirror one last time. The darkness was empty. I took another deep breath and tried to calm the tension in my back. The night was still quiet, but it felt normal now. There were no strange eyes shining in the distance, just the empty road and a long drive ahead. I heard the rain hitting my window hard around 2 a.m. I was sitting in my living room, lights off, curtains halfway closed, just scrolling through my phone. It was quiet inside. I had turned off the TV earlier because nothing seemed interesting. My place is small. A living room that connects to a short hallway, a kitchen to the left, a bedroom at the end. The front door leads to a tiny covered porch with a single light above it. I remember checking that porch light before sitting down. It was working fine. I also had a small security camera mounted above the door, facing the driveway and the porch steps. It triggers an alert on my phone if it sees motion. Not top of the line, but enough for basic security. That night, the rain was heavier than usual. I heard the water running off the roof and splashing onto the concrete below. My curtains were thin. Even though they were closed, I could see faint shapes outside whenever headlights passed on the street. It happened once or twice, cars rolling by, their beams sliding over my walls. I wasn't paying much attention. My mind was drifting. Then I noticed something weird. There was a shape outside on the porch. I saw it through the curtains. It looked like a person standing there completely still. It felt wrong because I hadn't heard anyone walk up. I had been listening to the rain, and I never heard footsteps or the creak of the porch. My front door is cheap. It makes a slight rattle if someone puts any weight on the deck. But I hadn't heard a thing. Still, I saw a shape. It was just a dark outline behind the thin fabric of the curtain. I froze for a moment, just staring at it. I didn't rush to the window. I just looked from where I sat. My heart started beating faster. The back of my neck felt tight. I got off the couch and stood up slowly. I tried to be quiet because I didn't want whoever it was to know I was there. But maybe they did know. Maybe they had seen the light of my phone. I stepped closer to the window. The figure did not move. It looked like a person wearing a hood, something covering their head. I couldn't see details, just a tall form standing completely still. I moved to the side and reached for my phone. No alerts from the camera app. That made me uneasy. If there was a person out there, why didn't the camera detect them? I opened the app. The camera was online. The last recorded clip was just rainfall, no figure. I tapped the live view. The screen showed the porch, the driveway, the reflection of the streetlight on the wet pavement. Nothing else. No person, no shape, just empty space. I peered back at the curtain. I still saw the shape, but on my phone's screen, there was no one there. I started to feel a little lightheaded. I closed the app and walked slowly to the door. The door has a small peephole. I took a deep breath. I pressed my eye against it, expecting to see a face staring back. The porch was empty. I looked for any sign of movement or a shadow. I saw the porch floor, wet from the rain blowing in, a small puddle forming in one corner. The porch light was on. There was no one out there. I stepped back and glanced at the curtain again. That shape was gone. I lifted the curtain and looked outside. The porch was empty, just like on the camera. The street beyond was quiet. The sidewalk was shiny with rain. There were no footprints that I could see from inside, not that I expected to see any from that angle. I unlocked the door and opened it, letting some rain blow in. My socks got damp as I stepped forward. I looked left and right. Nothing. Just rain and empty streets. The nearest house had its lights off. No movement anywhere. I checked around the corner of the porch. The ground was wet, covered in old leaves that had washed up. No footprints in the mud near the steps. I didn't see anything unusual except that puddle on the porch floor. The rain was falling at an angle, and some of it had splashed under the roof. The air was cold. My shirt stuck to my back a bit because I was tense and sweating. My hands felt slightly shaky. I went back inside and locked the door. I took my phone and tried to think clearly. Maybe it was just my imagination, but I was sure I had seen someone. My heart was still beating faster than normal. I tried to calm down. I thought about checking the camera history again. I sat back down on the couch and opened the app. It shows me a timeline of every motion event. The last one before I looked was about 15 minutes earlier. It showed a brief clip of the rain blowing by. Nothing else. No signs of a person. I checked the camera settings. Everything seemed normal. The sensitivity was high enough that it should have caught a person standing right on my porch. Still, there was nothing. I decided to ignore it and try to go to bed. But I couldn't. The sound of the rain was too loud. My mind kept going back to that shape. I hadn't imagined it. It was there. A solid figure standing on my porch. I got up and checked the front window again. I parted the curtain and looked outside. The porch light shone on empty space. The street was still. No cars, no people. Just rain. I paced around the living room. I felt frustrated. I didn't know what to do. Calling the police would sound stupid because there was no one there. There was no damage, no sign of forced entry, no real reason to believe a crime was happening. I tried to think logically. Maybe someone had stepped up to the porch, stood there for a second, and left. Maybe the camera missed it due to some glitch. It had happened before that the camera missed a delivery guy or a neighbor. Sometimes it just fails to record at the right moment. Still, that didn't explain how I saw the figure through the curtain but not through the peephole a second later. I decided to double-check the front door itself. I looked at the handle, the deadbolt. They were locked. The door seemed solid. The rain outside made a steady background noise. I listened for any sound of someone walking in the yard. Nothing. I checked the side windows. They were locked. The backyard gate was closed. I had no reason to think anyone had gotten inside or was lurking around. Still, I felt on edge. I tried to relax by making some instant coffee. It was late, but I didn't care. I boiled water, stirred in the powder, and sipped it while standing in the kitchen. I kept glancing towards the living room, half expecting to see that shape again. There was nothing there. Just the furniture and the glow of a streetlight on the wall. I took my coffee and sat near the window. I pulled the curtain aside and stared out at the porch. The rain kept hitting the roof, making a dull thumping sound. My porch light was a weak yellow bulb. It cast a small circle of light on the wet floorboards. I looked closely at that puddle. It was spreading out slowly. The wind must have changed direction. A small drip was hitting the porch floor, making ripples in the water. I watched for a while, maybe 10 or 15 minutes. Nothing moved outside. Eventually, I set my coffee down and decided to check the camera again. I tapped the app icon. The live feed looked normal. Empty porch, empty driveway, the neighbor's house across the street. Nothing unusual. I scrolled through the motion clips once more. Mostly just rain triggers. A car passed an hour ago. That was it. I started to feel tired and annoyed. I told myself I would try to sleep. I turned off the living room light and walked down the hall to my bedroom. I left the door cracked open so I could still hear if something happened outside. The rain continued. It never let up. I lay down in bed, still in my clothes, and just stared at the ceiling. My mind wouldn't let go of that image of someone standing on my porch. They looked tall, maybe 6 feet or more. I remember the outline of the shoulders, the head slightly tilted. I wondered if they were looking straight at me. I wondered if they saw me move. After maybe 20 minutes, I got back up. I couldn't rest. I returned to the living room and turned on the light. I decided to check outside one more time. I grabbed an old umbrella from the closet. I opened the front door and stepped out onto the porch, careful not to slip on the wet floor. I looked around again. The smell of wet pavement filled my nose. The street was empty. I checked the driveway. My car was parked there, covered in droplets. No footprints near it. The yard was just soggy grass and small puddles. I walked down the porch steps and stood in the rain for a moment. My shoulders got soaked immediately. My socks were already damp, so I didn't care anymore. I walked around the side of the house, shining my phone's light on the ground. I saw nothing but wet grass and some scattered leaves. No footprints, no sign of a person hiding. I walked around to the backyard fence. It was closed and latched. I checked the gate. It was secure. I listened carefully. Just rain, no voices, no footsteps. I went back to the front porch and stood there looking at my front door from the outside. The camera was mounted above the door, pointing towards the street. I could see the small LED on it. It was working. If I were standing here, the camera should be recording me. I pulled out my phone and checked the live feed. I saw myself on the screen, umbrella in hand. That confirmed the camera was working fine now. So why did it miss the figure earlier? I went back inside and locked the door. I felt a little better having checked around. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe someone had run up to the porch and just stood there waiting for a reaction. But why would they leave no sign, and how did they vanish so quickly? I decided to pass the time until morning. I sat in front of the TV, kept the volume low, and listened for any sound outside. The rain never slowed down. It kept going, steady and heavy. Eventually, around 4 a.m., I checked the porch again. Nothing. I felt tired enough to try sleeping again. I turned off the TV, left the living room light on this time, and went to bed. I lay in bed, trying to ignore the sound of rain. My heart rate was normal again. My breathing was steady. I felt calmer. Maybe I had imagined the whole thing. I tried to remember the exact moment I saw the figure. It was just a shape. No details. No color. Maybe it was just a shadow formed by a passing car's headlights. I had seen lights wash over the curtains before. Maybe some object outside cast a strange silhouette. I drifted off to sleep for a bit. When I woke up, it was early morning. The rain had stopped. The room was quiet. I got up and checked the porch again. It was just wet. Nothing else. I stepped outside with some paper towels and dried up the puddle. The air was crisp and smelled fresh. The street looked normal. A few neighbors were leaving for work. I nodded at one of them. He didn't mention anything unusual. I didn't bring it up. I checked the camera feed again in the daylight. It had recorded me stepping out with the umbrella, recorded me drying the puddle, recorded the neighbor walking by. Everything worked fine now. I scrolled back to the time I saw the figure. Nothing. Just rain. I never found any explanation. I checked for loose boards or something that might look like a person's shape in the dark. I found nothing that matched what I saw. I thought about the camera sensitivity. Maybe it glitched. Maybe the figure stood in some blind spot where the camera didn't get a clear outline. Still, the porch is small. There aren't many blind spots. I decided to move on with my day. I had breakfast, changed clothes, and tried not to think about it too much. But every time I looked at that porch, I remembered the shape. It was a solid, still figure, not moving, not reacting. When I checked through the peephole, it was gone. The camera didn't see it. Just me. That's all I know. I can't explain it. All I have is that memory of a shape standing quietly in the rain, and then vanishing without a sound. I never got an answer, and nothing like that happened again, at least not yet. I moved into this new place about a week ago. It was a small house on a quiet street. The first day I parked my old sedan in the short driveway, hauled my boxes inside, and looked around at the lawn and the neighbors' yards. Everything seemed normal and neat. The houses looked alike, simple and well-maintained. Nothing stood out. The next-door house to my left had its shutters closed and the lawn a bit overgrown, but I didn't think much of it. Some people don't take care of their yards, I thought. It didn't bother me. That first night I lay awake in bed, too wired from the move to sleep. Around midnight I heard something strange through the wall. At first I thought it was just an animal outside. But it didn't sound like an animal. It sounded like a person crying. It was muffled, but I could tell someone was sobbing softly, pausing now and then as if trying to hold it in. I got up and walked to the window. I looked out toward the house next door. All the lights were off. There were no cars outside. I couldn't see anything. I opened the window slightly and listened. The crying continued for about 10 minutes, then stopped. The next morning, I knocked on the neighbor's door across the street. I introduced myself to a man in his 50s wearing a gray t-shirt and jeans. He had short hair and a flat expression. "Hey," I said, "I'm new here. I was wondering about the house next door to me." I pointed to the house with the closed shutters. He glanced at it, then looked back at me. "That place is empty," he said. "Has been for years." I frowned. "Last night I heard someone crying," I said. "I'm pretty sure it was coming from inside that house." He shrugged. "Nobody's lived there. The owner moved out a long time ago. You must have heard something else. Maybe a cat." He didn't seem interested in talking more. He just nodded and closed his door. That day I talked to another neighbor down the street, a woman in her 30s wearing shorts and sneakers. She was watering her plants. I introduced myself and mentioned the crying. She looked confused. She said the same thing. The house was empty for a long time. maybe 8 years or so. She didn't know why nobody lived there. She said she never heard anything. I spent the rest of the afternoon unpacking. I set up my living room, put my TV on a small table, and tried to get my couch placed right. I organized my kitchen and filled the fridge with some basic groceries. By evening, I felt settled in enough. I didn't really believe the neighbors. I trusted what I heard. That was a person crying. I decided to stay up and listen again. That night, I turned off all the lights around midnight and sat near the window that faced the neighbor's house. At around 12:30, I heard it again. The crying started low, then got louder. It was soft, but I could tell it was inside that house. The sound was too steady and too human. I pressed my ear against the wall. I could almost feel the vibration. I turned off the AC to make sure I could hear every sound. The crying kept going for at least 10 minutes, then faded. I felt a knot in my stomach. It didn't feel right. I wanted to call someone, maybe the cops, but I had no evidence of anything. Calling the cops because I heard crying in an empty house at midnight seemed ridiculous. Still, I hated the feeling of not knowing. I told myself I'd check the place out tomorrow. The next day was warm. I walked over to the empty house around noon. The lawn had tall grass and some weeds. The porch steps were dusty. The front door had peeling paint and a dried, cracked welcome mat. I tried looking in through the front window, but the shutters were closed tight. I moved around the side, found another window also closed. Everything seemed sealed up. I tested the front doorknob, locked. I tried to peek through the mailbox slot, but it was blocked by something inside. The place was silent. There was no sound of movement. I knocked on the door just once, lightly. No response. I felt awkward standing there, so I gave up and went back home. Around 3 in the afternoon, I decided to ask another neighbor. An older couple lived to my right. They were outside in their driveway cleaning out their car. I walked over, introduced myself, and asked about the house again. The man straightened up and told me the same story. The house had been empty since before they moved in, which was about 5 years ago. He said it belonged to some guy who never came back after leaving one day. The place stayed locked, and nobody bothered with it. I asked him if he ever heard anything strange. He looked at his wife, then looked back at me, shaking his head. "It's quiet," he said. "We never noticed anything." His wife agreed. They both looked calm and a bit puzzled. I went inside my house and tried to relax. I turned on the TV, tried to watch a show, and ignored the feeling that something was off. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. That night, I stayed up again. This time, I sat at the window with a notepad and my phone, ready to record if I heard the crying again. Right at about 12:20 it started. The crying was soft but clear. I pressed record on my phone. I got up and looked out the window. Nothing. I opened my back door and stepped outside onto my small deck. It was dark out there, but the moon gave enough light to see silhouettes. The crying sounded the same, definitely from next door. I whispered, "Hello?" Into the night, not too loud. The crying paused. I held my breath. Then it started again, as if whoever it was didn't care if I heard them or not. I went back inside, locked my door, and sat down. I listened to the recording. It was faint, but it was there. Someone crying. I decided I would call the non-emergency police line the next day. Maybe they could check it out. It felt strange, but I needed to do something. The next morning, I called the local police station. The person on the phone was polite. I explained the situation. I said I heard crying every night at around the same time, coming from a supposedly empty house. The officer said they would send someone later to have a look. I thanked them and hung up. That evening, around 6, a patrol car showed up. One officer got out and spoke to me. I explained what I heard. He took some notes and walked over to the house. He checked the door and windows. He tried knocking. There was no answer. He shined a flashlight through a small gap in the shutters, then came back to me. "It looks empty," he said. "I don't see anyone inside. The house seems locked tight. Maybe it's an animal in the yard or something. If you hear it again, give us another call." He said it politely and left. I didn't feel reassured. I knew what I heard. Animals don't cry like that. This sounded like a person. And why at the same time every night? Why did it always stop after about 10 minutes? I made a plan. That night I would try to get closer. I would go into my backyard and move closer to the fence line that separated my yard from the neighbor's yard. Maybe I could catch some sign of movement, or maybe even see a light inside. At around midnight, I turned off all my lights. I put on dark clothes and stepped outside quietly. I walked across my small lawn and stood by the chain-link fence between my property and the empty house. The grass in the neighbor's yard was taller, and I could see a small wooden shed in the corner. No lights in the house. The crying started again around the same time. This time, it sounded clearer. It was definitely inside the house, not outside. I could hear it through the closed windows. My heart was beating fast. I felt sweat on my forehead. I tried to stay still and just listen. The crying sounded like a woman. Her sobs were uneven. Now and then, she took a shaky breath. I didn't hear words, just sobbing. I wanted to call out, but my throat felt tight. I just stood there, listening. The crying lasted about 10 minutes again, then stopped suddenly. I went back inside, locked the door, and washed my face. My hands were shaking a bit. I thought about breaking in. I'm not someone who does that kind of thing, but I was tired of this mystery. I wanted to know what was going on. If someone was hurt or trapped, they needed help. If it was some intruder, I wanted to know. I didn't plan on stealing anything, I just wanted to figure this out. The next day, I walked around the block and checked if there was any other way into the backyard of the empty house. I noticed a side gate on the other side of the property, but it had a padlock on it. The fence around the back was just chain link. I could climb it, but it would be risky. Someone might see me. Still, nobody seemed to care about that house, and nobody was paying attention to me when I walked by. I waited until midnight again. This time, I put on gloves and a dark jacket. I grabbed a small flashlight and put my phone in my pocket. I went outside through my back door, climbed the fence into the neighbor's backyard, and crouched down low. The house was dark and silent. I waited for the crying. Right on schedule, it started. The sound was coming from the ground floor, I think from the living room area. I moved slowly toward a window on the side. I tried lifting a shutter. It wouldn't budge. I tried another window. Also stuck. I went around to the back door. It was an old wooden door, locked with a deadbolt. I looked around and saw a loose plank in the siding near the back steps. I pulled on it carefully and saw a small crawl space. It smelled damp. I shined my flashlight inside. Just dirt and old insulation. No way in. The crying kept going, softer now but steady. I decided to try another window. On the far side of the house, I found a basement window that was cracked at the corner. The glass had a small break in it. I tapped it lightly. It felt loose. I wrapped my glove around a small rock and pressed against the cracked part, trying not to make noise. After a minute or two, I managed to break off a small shard of glass and push the window open. I shined my flashlight inside. The basement was dark and empty, just a concrete floor and some old shelves. I squeezed through the window, landing on the floor, trying not to scrape my legs on the frame. Inside, it smelled like dust and mildew. I stood still and listened. The crying was above me. I looked for stairs. I found a wooden staircase leading up. Each step creaked. I moved slowly, shining the flashlight ahead of me. At the top of the stairs, there was a door. I turned the knob. It wasn't locked. I opened it carefully and entered what looked like a kitchen. There was an old fridge, cabinets with peeling paint, and a table with dust on it. It was cold inside, and my skin tingled. The crying was coming from a room to my left. I moved toward it slowly, my heart pounding. I shined my flashlight ahead. The living room had old furniture covered with sheets. There was a sofa, 2 chairs, and a coffee table. In the corner, I saw movement. A figure sat on the floor back against the wall. It looked like a woman wearing jeans and a stained shirt. Her hair was tangled and fell over her face. She was rocking slightly, crying softly into her knees. I froze. The beam of my flashlight hit her face. She looked up. Her eyes were red and wet. She looked terrified. I raised my free hand and said, "I'm not here to hurt you." She didn't speak. She just stared at me, shaking. I could see her breathing heavily. I tried again. "I heard you crying. I live next door. Are you okay?" She said nothing. She pushed herself back against the wall. I stepped closer slowly, showing my empty hand. She flinched. I stopped. "I just want to help," I said. She swallowed. Her voice was low and rough. "Leave me alone," she said. I tried to stay calm. "Are you living here? Everyone says the house is empty." She wiped her nose with the back of her hand. She looked thin, tired, and stressed. She didn't answer my question. She just said, "Go. Get out." I stood there confused. I didn't know what to do. She was alive, not a ghost or anything. I tried to think of a reason for her to be here. Maybe she had nowhere else to go. Maybe she'd been squatting here for a long time. That would explain why nobody saw her. But why cry every night at the same time? I took a step back. I didn't want to scare her. "Okay, I'll go," I said. "But I can call someone. Maybe help you find a place to stay." She shook her head hard. "No, just go." Her voice cracked. She coughed a bit and wiped her eyes. I could feel the tension in my chest. I knew she was afraid of me. I decided not to push it. I turned around and went back to the kitchen. I found the basement door and climbed out the same way I came in. Outside, the air felt fresher. I climbed the fence and went back into my house. I locked my door and sat down at my kitchen table. My hands were trembling. I was glad nobody was hurt or dead, but now I felt uneasy. She was there for a reason, and I had no idea why. The crying didn't stop in the following nights. I still heard it at the same time, but now I knew who it was. I didn't go back in. I didn't call the cops again. I felt sorry for her. I wondered if she was sick or scared. I left a small package outside my backyard fence one afternoon, a bottle of water and some snacks in a sealed bag. The next day, it was gone. I never saw her come out, but I think she took it. I didn't try to speak to her again. The crying continued. Sometimes it lasted 5 minutes, sometimes longer. I still didn't understand it, but at least I knew she was alive. After a few days, I noticed a change. The crying became softer, less frequent. One night, it didn't happen at all. The next morning, I checked the fence. I saw footprints in the dirt leading away from the back door of the empty house. I never saw her again after that. The house stayed quiet. I still live here. The neighbors never asked about it. They never seemed curious. I didn't tell anyone what I found. The empty house is still empty, or at least it looks that way now. I sleep better. Sometimes I think I hear a soft sobbing noise when I wake up in the middle of the night, but it's probably just my memory playing tricks on me. I keep my doors locked, and I try not to stare at the house too long. I know what I saw. I know what I heard. It happened, and now it's done. I'm just glad I never found anything worse. I still remember how the air felt that morning. It was a dry morning, no clouds, no wind, just me and the trail. The dirt path stretched ahead with weeds and brush along the sides. I had my running shoes tied tight, a small water bottle in my right hand, and a phone strapped to my arm. It was supposed to be a quick run, maybe a couple of miles. I wanted to get home before the heat got worse. There were no other people around. I didn't see any parked cars near the trail entrance, and I didn't pass anyone at the start. That felt normal. This trail was never crowded. I started at a slow pace, just trying to warm up. I focused on my breathing. I listened to the soft crunch of gravel under my shoes. I tried to keep my eyes forward. The trail had tall grass growing along both sides. Sometimes the grass swayed gently if there was a breeze. But that day it stood still. I could see small flies buzzing around, and I heard distant chirps from birds. There wasn't much else going on. After about 10 minutes, I felt my legs loosen up. I increased my pace. My shoes were old, and I could feel the thin soles letting me know each rock underfoot. My calves felt a bit tight. I was sweating a little. I took a short sip of water. I tried to relax my shoulders and keep my breathing steady. Then I heard something strange, something that didn't fit in. At first it sounded like a faint whisper, very low, very soft, coming from my left side. I slowed down and looked around. I didn't see anyone. The grass was high enough to hide small animals, but a person would have to crouch down to stay hidden. I saw nothing unusual. I stood still for a moment and listened. I only heard my own breathing and a few insects. I shrugged it off and started running again. A minute or two later, I heard it again. It was a whisper, but I couldn't make out words. I looked over my shoulder. Nothing. I tried to ignore it. I ran forward at my normal pace. Then I heard my name. I was sure it said my name. A whisper right next to my ear, but there was no one there. It was a man's voice, I think, but it was soft and hard to tell. It seemed to come from the grass, maybe a foot or two from the edge of the trail. I stopped, took a few steps back, and tried to look closely. The grass was tall, some of it up to my chest, and it was thick. I could see thin stalks, some brownish, some green. I tried to push the grass aside with my hand. I saw bare earth and a few pebbles, but no sign of a person. I listened carefully. The trail was quiet. I felt a drop of sweat running down my forehead. I blinked and wiped my face with my forearm. I tried to speak. Hello? My voice sounded strange and too loud. I waited. Nothing. I stood there, tense, trying to figure out if I was just hearing things. I turned around and considered heading back. It was unusual to hear someone say my name out here. It felt wrong. But I told myself it could have been a trick of the wind, or some distant sound that resembled my name. I decided to continue forward. I wanted to finish the run. I didn't have time to waste. I picked up my pace and focused on my breathing again. In and out, steady steps, eyes forward. I tried to forget about it, but a few minutes later I heard the whisper again. This time it was a bit louder and clearer. It said my name once, paused, and then said it again. It came from the left side of the trail, from the grass. I turned my head while still running, but I caught no movement, no shape, no face. I slowed to a jog, then to a walk, and finally stopped. My heart was beating faster now, and not just from running. I stood there, trying to keep calm. I listened. The whisper started up again, quiet but persistent. It repeated my name 3 times, slowly. I wanted to shout at it, tell whoever was hiding there to show themselves. But my mouth felt dry. I swallowed, tried to stay calm, and said, "Who's there?" No answer. Just the whisper again, my name, and soft breathing sounds. It sounded like someone exhaling near my ear. I stepped toward the grass, reached in, and pushed it aside again. My fingers touched the dry blades. I saw dirt, small patches of weeds, a few rocks. I even kicked at the base to see if something would move. Nothing. I backed away and looked around the trail. There were no footprints other than mine. I saw my own shoe prints in the dirt. The air was still. I heard no cars, no people, nothing else. Just the whisper. It was coming from the grass. I tried walking slowly forward along the trail, keeping my eyes on the grass line. The whisper followed me. It didn't stop. It didn't fade. It called my name over and over. I tried talking to it. I asked, "What do you want?" I got nothing in return except my name again. I started to feel the hairs on my arms standing up. My neck felt stiff. My stomach tightened. I felt exposed. I could smell my sweat, and I noticed my breathing was getting shaky. I gripped my water bottle harder. The plastic creaked in my hand. I tried to ignore it and run again, hoping that if I got far enough along the trail it would stop. I ran at a steady pace, pushing myself harder. My shoes kicked up small clouds of dust. The whisper kept pace with me. It didn't fall behind. It stayed right at my side, always out of sight. I looked to my left as I ran. The grass was thick still and not moving. I couldn't understand how someone could be in there, whispering my name, and not show up at all. There was no rustling, no footsteps, no bending of the grass. After maybe half a mile of this, I stopped again. I couldn't keep running like this. I turned toward the grass and said, "I don't know who you are. Show yourself." I waited. It just whispered my name again. My pulse was racing, my legs felt heavy, my chest felt tight. I grabbed my phone. I thought of calling someone, but I hesitated. Who would I call? The police? What would I say? That I heard a whisper in the grass calling my name? They would think I was crazy or joking. Also, there was no signal out here. The reception on this trail was always terrible. I stepped closer to the grass. I knelt down and tried to part it carefully. I wanted to catch any movement, any sign of a person. I saw only dirt and some bugs crawling around. I could smell the earthy scent of the soil. I saw a few small plants with tiny leaves. I saw no hidden figure. The whisper didn't sound like it was coming from one particular spot. It felt like it was just there, all around the left side of the trail. I stood up and backed away. I felt uneasy. My face felt hot, and I noticed my mouth was still dry. I took another sip of water, trying not to spill it because my hand was shaking a bit. I tried walking again, slowly, keeping my eyes on the grass. The whisper matched my pace. Whenever I stopped, it continued, always at that same soft volume, always my name repeated over and over. I tried something different. I walked to the other side of the trail and stood there, putting the width of the path between me and the grass. The whisper grew quieter, but it didn't stop. I approached the middle of the path and it got a bit louder again. It always seemed loudest when I was closest to the left side. I took a step toward the left side. The whisper got louder, but still not loud enough to give me any other words. It only said my name. It sounded like a man's voice, low and steady, not frantic or hurried. It sounded calm, which made it feel even worse. I would have preferred shouting or screaming, something that made sense. This calm, steady whisper felt unnatural. I tried to think of a way to get past it. The trail ahead curved slightly and led deeper into the scrubland. The grass didn't look any shorter up ahead. If I kept going, I would have another mile or two before I reached a side path that led back to a main road. But that meant staying close to this voice. I considered turning back. But that would mean running all the way back to the start, and I wasn't sure if the whisper would follow me back. Maybe it would. Maybe it would never stop. I decided to keep moving forward. I picked up my pace and tried to keep my eyes straight ahead. I focused on the end of the straight section of trail. I watched the pebbles and dirt under my feet. I could feel sweat running down my back. The whisper continued, steady, calm, repeating my name. I felt my muscles tense. I tried to block it out, but I couldn't. It was too close, too strange. As I approached a slight bend in the trail, I noticed the grass thinning a little. There were some patches of shorter grass. I moved forward, hoping that if I reached a place where the grass was not as tall, maybe the voice would stop. I ran, breathing hard, my heart pounding. The whisper stayed with me. It didn't fade. It just kept going. When I reached the thinner grass, I slowed down and checked the sides again. The whisper was still there. It didn't matter that the grass was shorter. I looked around desperately, trying to catch a glimpse of anything. I saw empty fields, a few scattered shrubs, dry soil, and some distant trees. I saw nothing that could explain the whisper. I clenched my jaw and tried to ignore the shaking in my hands. I remembered I had a small pocket knife in my shorts pocket. It was a cheap folding knife I sometimes carried. I pulled it out and flipped it open. It made me feel a bit more secure, though I had no idea who or what I would use it against. I held it down by my side and stared at the grass. "Stop," I said. "Just stop." The whisper didn't stop. It said my name again, slower this time. I felt a drop of sweat fall from my chin. I wanted to leave this place. I wanted to get out of there. I decided to keep moving forward, to run until I got to the main road. I knew I would feel safer once I reached a place where cars might pass by. I started jogging again, faster this time. I let my legs work. I tried to ignore the dryness in my throat. I tried to ignore the stiffness in my shoulders and neck. The whisper matched my speed. It stayed with me for the next 10 minutes. Every time I glanced at the grass, it looked normal. Nothing moved. Nothing stood out. The voice never changed. It never got angry or louder than a whisper. It never said anything other than my name. But it never let me go. I kept running. My lungs burned. My feet ached. I just focused on putting one foot in front of the other. The whisper followed. It never fell behind. I tried to say things to it. I said, "Leave me alone." I said, "I don't know what you want." I said, "Just go away." None of it mattered. My name, repeated over and over, never stopping. Finally, I saw the trail junction ahead. There was a small wooden post marking the way toward the main road. I felt relief flood through me. I turned onto that side trail. The grass there was shorter. There were more rocks. The ground was harder. The whisper continued at first, but then it started to fade. I noticed after a minute that it grew quieter. I looked back at the main trail. I still saw the tall grass. I still felt uneasy. I waited and listened. The whisper got softer as I moved away. After about 30 more steps, I realized I could barely hear it. After another 30 steps, it was gone. I stopped and took several deep breaths. I listened carefully. I heard nothing but my own breathing and a distant hum of insects. No voice. I didn't celebrate. I just stood there, shaking slightly, trying to calm down. I looked down at my legs. They were dirty with dust and bits of dry grass. My shoes were filthy. My phone band was soaked with sweat. I felt a throbbing headache coming on. I put my knife back in my pocket, took a sip of my remaining water, and started walking toward the main road. I kept my eyes on the ground. I didn't want to look back. I didn't understand what had happened, and I didn't want to think about it. When I reached the main road about 15 minutes later, I saw a car drive by. I sighed and felt a bit safer. I checked my phone and got a weak signal. I opened it and saw the time. It had only been about 40 minutes since I started my run. It felt like hours. I walked along the roadside until I reached the small parking area where I had started. My car was still there. I got in, locked the doors, and turned on the engine. I drove away without looking back at the trail. For the rest of that day, I tried not to think about what I had heard. The whisper was too strange to make sense of. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't know how to explain it. I didn't return to that trail. I took a different route the next time I went running. I still feel uneasy when I think about that voice, whispering my name from the grass, following me, never showing itself, never changing its tone. Even now, I can remember exactly how it sounded, and how dry the air felt, and how quiet everything else was. I can still feel that sweat running down my back and the tension in my stomach. I have no explanation for it. I'm just glad I got out of there. I have no plans to go back and find out what was in that grass. I first noticed it when we were stopping to catch our breath on a dirt path. It was late afternoon. There were 4 of us: me, Peter, Mark, and Luis. We had decided to go hiking in a remote park far from any town or city. We had heard that the trails here were quiet and the scenery was worth it. The trees were tall and dense. The leaves were dry and rustled whenever a slight breeze passed through. It felt like a place where not many people came. As I stood there leaning forward with my hands on my knees, I looked up at the tree line and saw a light. It was about the size of a golf ball from where I stood, shining bright white and hovering above the tops of the trees. It wasn't just hanging there. It moved around in quick, small jerks like a drone with a bad pilot. But there was no sound. I tried to listen. I tried to pick up any distant hum or buzzing. I heard nothing. just my own breathing and the crunch of dirt under Mark's boots as he shifted his weight. I wiped sweat from my forehead and pointed it out to the others. Peter squinted and asked if it might be a reflection of something, maybe a plane or a helicopter far away. I didn't think so. The movement seemed too weird. It would dart left, then right, then suddenly rise higher and remain still before shifting position again. It was bright against the clear sky. We couldn't see it clearly through the leaves, but whenever it found a gap, we caught its glow. Luis took out his phone and tried to record it, but there was no signal out here, and the camera just captured a shaky white dot. He cursed and said it was probably nothing. Still, he looked concerned. We all were. It felt odd. We were far from any popular viewpoint or rest area. If it was a drone, it belonged to someone with a reason to be out here watching hikers. That made no sense. We had passed nobody else on the trail all day. We decided to keep moving. We had planned on making camp near a stream another few miles ahead. We walked at a steady pace, watching the light whenever we got a chance. It stayed with us, drifting above the treetops on our left side. Sometimes it vanished behind branches and we thought maybe it was gone. Then it would pop up again ahead of us or behind us. It seemed impossible for it to move that fast without making a sound. There was no rustle of equipment, no mechanical whir. As the sun lowered, we kept an eye on it. Our mood changed. We weren't joking around anymore. We were more alert. Mark tapped my shoulder a few times to point it out whenever it reappeared. Peter got frustrated and tried shouting at it, just yelling, "Hey!" into the trees. There was no reaction. The light continued to slip in and out of view. When it was out of sight, I got tense. My stomach tightened, and I felt a dry sensation in my throat. I kept expecting it to appear from a new angle, maybe right above us. We didn't talk much, just the crunch of our boots and the rustling of gear. After another hour or so, we reached a small clearing. It was an area with a few logs and some flat ground. We had planned this as our campsite for the night. The stream was a short walk downhill from here. The air was getting cooler. The sky had started to turn orange and then pink. I dropped my pack and tried to relax my shoulders. My legs were sore. I took a sip of water and tried to ignore the dryness in my mouth. I looked around for the light. It wasn't there. The others scanned the tree line and didn't see it either. Peter said maybe it was gone. Maybe it had been some weird reflection of the sun on something metal, and now that the sun was going down, it wouldn't appear again. None of us really believed that. There was something too controlled, too deliberate about the way it had moved. But none of us had a better guess. We set up camp without much conversation. I unrolled my tent and tried to focus on the immediate tasks. I hammered stakes into the ground, pulled the rainfly over the top, and set my sleeping bag inside. Luis lit his camp stove and heated some canned food. Mark kept scanning the treetops as if he expected something to drop down. Peter was fiddling with his headlamp, adjusting the straps and glancing around nervously. As darkness fell, we turned on our flashlights and headlamps. The woods felt tighter, the trees seemed closer together. The crunch of small animals moving in the leaves made me tense. I ate my dinner quietly, tasting the blandness of it and feeling no real hunger. I was uneasy. I looked up at the sky. The stars were clear. Without city lights, the view was sharp, and I could see more stars than I ever saw back home. But I kept expecting that white light to show up again. I heard nothing out of the ordinary. Just the usual sounds of the forest at night. Insects, a light breeze, leaves shifting in the dark. We talked in low voices. Peter wanted to keep watch, just to be safe. I didn't blame him. Something about that light had shaken us. We had all gone hiking before, and we were used to nature's surprises. But this felt different. It felt directed at us. I said I would take a watch as well. Mark and Luis agreed. We would rotate through the night. Nobody argued. It seemed like the only way to calm our nerves. I took the first watch, sitting on a log with my headlamp off to preserve the batteries. I held my flashlight in my hand. I listened for anything unusual. After about half an hour, I saw it. The same light. It was back, hovering over the treetops on the opposite side of the clearing. I felt a chill spread through my chest. I gripped the flashlight tighter and held it up, shining it toward the light. It stayed there, not reacting, just bobbing around silently. I walked over to Mark's tent and whispered his name. He scrambled out of his sleeping bag and peeked outside. He saw the light and froze. He called Peter and Luis. They got out, still groggy, shining their lights at it. We watched it together. Nobody knew what to say. I felt the hairs on my arms stand up. My heart was beating faster. I noticed my breathing got shallower. The light dipped behind the treetops, then reappeared on the other side of the clearing, as if it had circled around us. Luis tried yelling again, something like, "Who's there? What do you want?" Nothing. No response. We considered shining a bright beam at it with our strongest flashlight. Mark had a powerful one in his pack. He dug it out, turned it on, and aimed it straight at the thing. For a second, the beam cut through the darkness, lighting up some branches and leaves. But we could not see the source of the light. It was like it stayed just far enough away, or behind something. After a few seconds, it vanished again. Mark cursed under his breath. Luis spat on the ground and rubbed his arms as if trying to warm up. We talked quickly and quietly. We didn't want to leave in the middle of the night and risk getting lost. We had some experience hiking, but not enough to feel safe making a run for it with only headlamps and flashlights. We decided to wait until morning. We would pack up and head back down the trail. We saw no reason to stay here another night. The tension was too much. None of us liked the feeling of being watched by something we didn't understand. We stood there for a while, shining our flashlights around, trying to spot the light again. It didn't come back. After maybe an hour, we were too tired to keep standing around. We agreed to go back into our tents. We would take turns staying awake. I crawled into my sleeping bag and lay on my back, listening. It was hard to sleep. My mind kept replaying the sight of that bright dot moving too fast and too silent. I rubbed my eyes and tried to calm down. Eventually, I dozed off. I woke up to Mark shaking my shoulder. It was probably around 3 or 4 in the morning. He said he saw it again. I got up, rubbed my face, and stumbled out of the tent. He pointed to the trees. I saw nothing. He insisted it had been there, circling the clearing. I believed him, of course. We waited, shining our lights around. All we got were glimpses of leaves and branches, nothing else. After a while, I got tired and climbed back inside the tent. Mark stayed outside a bit longer, then eventually came in too. Morning light woke me up. My back was stiff. I crawled out and saw Luis boiling water for coffee. He looked tired. His eyes were red. Peter sat on a log, running a hand through his hair. Mark was rolling up his sleeping pad. We all wanted to get the hell out of here. I ate a quick energy bar and drank some coffee. It was bitter and not very good, but I needed something warm. We started packing up. The forest looked normal in the morning. Just trees, dirt, leaves, sunlight. No sign of that strange light. We headed back the way we came. The trail was the same narrow path through thick woods. Our boots made steady thumps against the dirt and rocks. We tried to keep an eye on the treetops, but we saw nothing unusual. I focused on my breathing and on moving forward. I wanted to be done with this place. I felt sweat gathering under my backpack straps. I felt a dull ache in my thighs. Nobody talked much. Every now and then, Peter would glance behind us. Mark looked up a lot, shading his eyes with his hand. We walked for hours. The hike was supposed to be enjoyable, but now we just wanted to be out. My shirt stuck to my back. My socks felt damp. The air smelled like pine and dirt. It was quiet, except for our steps and the occasional bird call. I tried not to think too much. I just counted steps and kept going forward. Around midday, we stopped near a spot where the trail widened. We checked our maps. We still had a few hours to go before we reached the ranger station where we had parked. We ate some jerky and drank water. My throat felt dry and I didn't feel hungry, but I forced something down. Luis kept scanning the trees. I did too. The sunlight was bright, and I couldn't see anything that looked like a hovering light. I started to wonder if it would come back in daylight. Part of me hoped it wouldn't. Another part of me worried about when it would show up again. We started moving again. After another hour or so, I caught a glimpse of something bright off to the side. I stopped and stared. The others noticed and stopped too. The light was back just above a ridge, flickering in and out of view as if it was ducking behind branches. I felt my heart speed up. My palms were sweaty. I could feel the tension in my shoulders. I didn't say anything. I just pointed. The others saw it. Peter muttered a curse. Mark's jaw tightened. Louis shook his head and tried to record it with his phone again with no luck. Just a shaky dot. We stood there, not sure what to do. It didn't come closer. It seemed to track us, staying parallel to the trail. We started walking again, and it moved too, always staying out of clear view. At one point, I tried to break into a light jog. It stayed with us. I slowed down. It stayed. I felt like we were under observation. My stomach felt tight. I licked my lips and tasted salt. I pulled the straps of my backpack tighter and tried to ignore it. After a while, it vanished again. We kept moving. Each step felt heavy. The silence between us was thick. I noticed Mark's fists were clenched. Peter kept shaking his head quietly. Luis rubbed the back of his neck, leaving red marks on his skin. I just focused on getting out. The hours dragged on. The forest looked the same, but we knew we were getting closer to the ranger station. Eventually, the trees thinned out. We recognized a turn in the trail near a signpost we had seen the day before. There was a wooden bench and a small trash bin. We were about half an hour from the ranger station. The sunlight was strong and I could feel it on my neck. I looked back one last time and saw no sign of the light. It had disappeared completely. I felt relieved, but not comfortable. I wanted to be inside a building with people around. We got back to the ranger station in the late afternoon. We walked straight to the parking lot where we had left our car. Peter started the engine, and we got in, slamming the doors. None of us talked about what we saw. I think we all just wanted to leave it behind. As we drove away, I felt my body relax a little, but my mind kept playing back that silent, hovering light. I wondered if anyone else had seen something like that out here. We never reported it. None of us wanted to deal with the questions or the look on the ranger's face if we tried to explain something we couldn't understand. We just headed home. In the following days, we texted each other, but we didn't go into detail. I think we were glad to drop it. But I still remember how my throat felt dry, how my heart pounded, how the sweat rolled down my spine when I looked up and saw that thing tracking us through the trees. It's not something I'll forget. It's not something I want to see again. I remember the exact moment I saw it. I was working on the house on a Saturday morning. The place was a mess. I had pulled down old drywall, carried out dusty boxes, and tossed broken pieces of wood into a dumpster outside. I was tired, sweaty, and my shoulders ached from lifting heavy things. The plan was simple. Fix the wiring in the ceiling, run new cables, then patch everything and repaint. The house was small and old, and I had a detailed blueprint from the last owners. There were no hidden rooms on that plan, no strange areas. It was a straightforward single-story house with a basic attic space that I had checked when I first bought the property. Everything seemed normal. That morning, I climbed up the stepladder in the hallway, pulled back a section of plaster I had cut, and spotted a door in the ceiling. It was a flat wooden door, about 2 feet wide and maybe 3 feet long. It sat flush with the ceiling beams. I froze and stared at it for a few seconds. I knew that door had not been there before. The attic entrance was supposed to be in another area of the house, on the other side, with a fold-down ladder. I had used it a couple of times. This new door was something else. It had old hinges and a simple handle. It looked like a panel that someone had installed a long time ago. But I had never seen it, and it wasn't on the plans. I was confused. I ran a hand over the wood. The door felt rough. The hinges had a bit of rust. The handle was a simple piece of metal that curved out, not a modern fixture. It reminded me of something people used decades back. I tried to move it, to check if it was locked. It moved slightly, making a small scraping sound against the beams. I heard nothing else. The attic above me should have been empty except for insulation and old wiring. I wondered if I was mixing things up, if the blueprint had missed something. I decided to open it. I reached up and tugged the handle. The door stuck at first. I pulled harder and it made a crackling noise, like old paint or wood splitting slightly at the edges. Then it opened upward. I pushed it all the way. Dust fell into my eyes, and I squinted. I wiped my face on my sleeve. I lifted my work light up into the hole to see what was there. My light shone into an open space. It looked like an unfinished attic area, just joists and insulation. I couldn't see anything unusual at first. I leaned my head up through the opening. The space felt cramped, but it was large enough for a person to lie down. The roof beams were low. The insulation was old and discolored. I smelled stale air like a room that hadn't been opened in decades. I didn't see any boxes or stored items. It looked empty. I listened. It was quiet, except for my own breathing and the distant hum of the street outside. There was no movement, no voices, no animals, but I felt strange. I felt like I wasn't alone. My neck tingled. I felt a prickling on my arms. It was like someone was just out of sight watching me. I focused my light in every direction. Nothing moved. I backed my head out and closed the door. The hinges squeaked. I stood on the ladder staring at it. I tried to calm myself by thinking rationally. It was just an old hidden part of the attic, maybe a sealed-off section that nobody bothered to mark on the plans. It could happen in old houses. Maybe someone who lived here before created a small storage space and never told anyone. Still, the feeling of being watched bothered me. It didn't make sense. Maybe I was just spooked by discovering something unexpected. I climbed down and thought about what to do next. My arms felt tense. My stomach felt tight. I had no reason to go up there, but I also didn't want to ignore it. I decided I would finish my wiring job, close it up, and forget about it. I got back to work. I tried to concentrate on the wiring. My tools felt heavier than usual. My back hurt. I kept looking over my shoulder at that part of the ceiling. It was above the hallway near the old coat closet. I never noticed any hatch there before. I finished the wiring and put my tools away. In the late afternoon, I had some lunch. I tried to watch something on my phone to relax, but I kept thinking about that door. I felt uneasy inside the house now. It was too quiet. The air felt still, like there was no circulation. I opened some windows. I stood under the door again, looking up, trying to see if I had imagined it. It was still there. The outline of the door was clear. I grabbed the ladder and decided to look again, just to make sure there was nothing inside that I missed. I climbed up and opened it again. I held my flashlight firmly and inspected the space more carefully. I moved the light slowly across the beams, the insulation, the corners. I noticed some old nails sticking out of the wood. There was a piece of wood lying flat across two beams, maybe a plank someone had left behind. Nothing else was visible, but the feeling was back, stronger now. I felt my heart beating faster. My mouth was dry. My shoulders felt stiff. I spoke out loud, just to break the silence. I said something like, "Anyone here?" Obviously no one answered. My voice sounded strange up there. It felt like the sound got swallowed by the space. I got a chill. I pulled my head back down and shut the door. I locked it with a small latch I found on the side. It clicked into place. I climbed down and wiped sweat off my face. I told myself to keep calm. It was just an attic space. I would seal it off later, maybe tomorrow. I would put some drywall over it and pretend I never saw it. But I couldn't shake the idea that something was wrong. That evening, I tried to relax. I ate a sandwich and drank a beer. I walked around the house, checking my renovation progress. I still had a lot to do. I planned to paint the living room, fix the bathroom sink, and sand the bedroom floor. The house felt different now. I was on edge. I kept thinking I heard small noises like creaking boards or a soft tapping sound. Every time I listened closely, I heard nothing. I looked up at the ceiling a lot. I felt watched like eyes on my back. My stomach was in knots. I decided to sleep early and deal with it in the morning. At night, I woke up a few times. I thought I heard soft footsteps. I thought I heard a slight scraping above me. I lay still in bed, holding my breath, my heart beating fast. The sounds were faint. Maybe it was just the house settling. Old houses make noise. Still, my skin felt sweaty. I wanted to get up and check, but I didn't want to open that door again. I felt stupid and nervous. Eventually, I fell asleep again, but I slept lightly. In the morning, I decided to deal with it. I grabbed a crowbar and a piece of plywood. My plan was to close that door for good. I climbed the ladder, opened the door again, and peeked inside one last time. Everything looked the same as before. Nothing had changed. There was no sign that anyone had been there. I still felt that uneasy tension in my chest. My mouth tasted bitter. My hands were sweaty, and my grip on the ladder was tight. I shut the door and screwed the plywood over it, sealing it shut from below. I made sure it was secure. I told myself that was the end of it. But as I worked on other parts of the house that day, I couldn't focus. I felt something was off. I caught myself listening for sounds from the ceiling. When I went to the bathroom, I looked up at the ceiling corners. I felt a slight draft in places I hadn't noticed before. I kept telling myself it was just nerves. I finished painting one wall and took a break. I tried to distract myself by calling a friend. I told him about the odd door I found. I didn't mention the feeling of being watched. I just said it was strange to find a hidden attic hatch. He said old houses have weird features sometimes, that maybe someone built it and never documented it. We talked about normal stuff, and that helped for a while. But when I hung up, the house was silent again, and that tension returned. Late in the afternoon, I heard a soft tap. I froze. I stood in the hallway, listening. The sound came from above. I stared at the plywood I had installed. I listened, holding my breath. Another tap. It was faint, like a fingertip against wood. I backed away. My chest felt tight. My neck muscles were stiff. My pulse pounded in my ears. I tried to think of a reason for the sound. Maybe something was expanding with the heat, or maybe a branch outside was brushing against something. But there were no branches near that part of the house. I turned on music. I tried to ignore it. Later, I went outside and walked around. I stared up at the roof. It looked normal. No new vents, no obvious changes. I came back inside, had a quick dinner, and tried not to look at that part of the ceiling. But I felt it. I felt like there were eyes on me whenever I passed under it. The air felt colder beneath the sealed door. My throat felt dry. I drank water. I clenched and unclenched my fists. I was tense and I didn't know why. That night was worse. I woke up sweating. I heard a soft scraping sound. I sat up in bed. It came from the hallway. My heart hammered in my chest. I got up and turned on the light. My legs felt heavy. I walked to the hallway. The plywood was still in place, but it looked slightly different. One corner seemed to have lifted by a fraction of an inch. I couldn't be sure. I ran my finger along the edge. It seemed tight. Maybe I was imagining it. I stood there for a long time, just staring. My hands were shaking a bit. I breathed through my nose, trying to stay calm. I couldn't hear anything now, but I could feel something. The house felt charged, like the air before a thunderstorm. I decided I would not stay quiet any longer. I spoke out loud again, just firmly. "Stop." I said it without shouting, just clearly. The silence continued. I rubbed my face, feeling the stubble on my jaw, feeling sweat on my forehead. I went back to bed, but I didn't sleep well. The next morning, I checked the plywood again. It was still intact, but I noticed a thin crack in the ceiling plaster around it. A hairline crack, barely visible. I knew I didn't cause that crack. I had been careful. I touched it. The plaster felt cold. I pressed my ear against the wood. I heard nothing. I spent most of the day finishing other parts of the renovation. I tried not to think about it, but every time I passed the hallway, I felt that tension. I felt my neck muscles tighten and my stomach clench. In the afternoon, I decided to try something else. I set up a chair in the hallway and placed my phone on it with the camera recording. I aimed it at the plywood. I wanted to see if something moved or changed when I wasn't looking. I let it record for about an hour while I worked in another room. When I came back, I checked the footage. Nothing seemed to move, but I noticed a strange moment where the light in the hallway flickered slightly. I couldn't tell if it was the camera adjusting. Nothing else happened. Still, I felt uneasy. I tried to work on the living room walls. The paint smelled strong and my hands were covered in dust and dried paint. I kept checking the time, waiting for evening. When night fell, I locked all the doors and windows. I turned off the lights and listened. I could hear my heart beating. I waited in the hallway for a long time, standing quietly. Nothing happened. Eventually, I got tired and went to bed. I couldn't sleep well. I woke up sweating again and checked the hallway repeatedly. Nothing changed, but I still felt that presence. Over the next few days, I tried to ignore it. I kept busy with the renovation. I patched holes. I installed fixtures. I moved furniture. I listened to loud music. I tried to pretend it was all in my head. But every night I felt that tension in the hallway. I tried sleeping with earplugs. I tried closing all the doors between my bedroom and that hallway. I tried turning on a fan to mask the silence. None of that helped. The feeling was always there when I stepped into that part of the house. I never saw anything. I never found footprints or claw marks. No one got hurt. No one else came by except for a friend who helped me move some heavy furniture once. He never said he felt anything strange. He didn't notice the sealed door in the ceiling. I didn't tell him about it. I didn't want to sound crazy. Eventually, I decided to leave that part of the house alone. I finished the other rooms. I moved my bedroom to the opposite side of the house. I avoided the hallway at night. I left the plywood where it was, sealed tight. I never opened it again. I tried to accept the situation. I felt watched, but nothing ever happened beyond that feeling and the occasional tapping sound. I learned to live with it. I kept myself busy and stayed out of that area as much as possible. When the renovations were mostly done, I placed a piece of furniture right under that sealed door so I wouldn't have to look directly at it. A tall bookshelf blocked the view. I rarely stood in that exact spot anymore. Sometimes I thought I heard soft sounds, but I never investigated further. I tried to keep my mind focused on practical tasks. It has been a while now, and the feeling hasn't gone away completely, but it's weaker. I guess I got used to it. I still know there's something off about that hidden attic space. I still feel eyes on me sometimes when I'm not paying attention. But I just keep moving and get on with my day. The door is sealed. Nothing comes out. I have no proof that anything is there. It's just an empty attic, old wood and dust. But I remember how I felt up there. I know I'm not alone, even if I can't see anyone. I don't have a grand explanation. I don't plan to call experts or rip the ceiling open again. I'm done with that. The house is mine now, and I'll live with whatever that presence is. It never touched me or harmed me. It just watches, silently, from behind that old plywood. I accept that. I keep my head down and do my work. And if I feel eyes on me, I just move along. I have no other choice. I still remember the first night it happened. I was lying in bed staring at the ceiling in the dark. The street outside was quiet. Then I heard it. A single, sharp bark that cut through the silence. It made me tense up. I stayed still, waiting to see if it would happen again. About a minute later, I heard another bark. It was distant, but not too far away. Maybe from the bushes behind my fence or from the alley on the side of my garage. I couldn't tell. I tried to ignore it. I tried to close my eyes and breathe slowly, but it came again and again like a steady, annoying sound that kept hitting my ears. I got frustrated but didn't do anything that night. I let it go and waited for sunrise. The next night I tried to fall asleep earlier, thinking maybe I wouldn't notice it if I was already out. but it came at around the same time, maybe a little past midnight. The barking started and kept going, not constant, but in bursts. Every minute or so, a bark. Sometimes two barks together. Then silence for a bit, and then another bark. I stared at the window, trying to figure out if I should get up. I didn't want to deal with some stray dog in the middle of the night, but it was pissing me off. I needed sleep. After about 30 minutes of this, I pulled my pillow over my head, trying to drown it out. It didn't work. I considered opening the window and shouting, but I didn't want to draw attention to myself. I also didn't know if it was a neighbor's dog. If it was, I didn't want to fight with anyone. So I stayed quiet. I got maybe 3 hours of rest. By the third night, I felt like a zombie. My eyes were dry. My neck was stiff. I felt slow, my head heavy. That night, I tried to stay up on purpose, sitting in the dark, waiting for the barking to start. It came again. I got up and walked to the kitchen. I opened the back door a crack, listening. The bark sounded nearby, like it was right behind my wooden fence or maybe around the corner of my small shed. I grabbed a flashlight from a drawer. I listened more. Silence. Then another bark. It sounded off to the left. I stepped out onto the small concrete step behind my back door. It was cold. I felt a chill on my bare arms. I had only a t-shirt and sweatpants on. I pointed the flashlight toward the fence line. I saw nothing. I turned it off and waited. The bark sounded again. It sounded like a dog, but also not quite right. Something about its tone was off. It was low and had a rough sound that made me uneasy. I stepped back inside, locked the door, and sat in the kitchen until sunrise. I got maybe 2 hours of sleep after that. By the fourth night, I had had enough. I decided I would go outside and look around, even if I had to crawl under bushes. I prepared earlier in the evening. I put on jeans, boots, a jacket with plenty of pockets, and I carried a good flashlight. I waited until the barking started. When I heard it, I moved quietly. I tried not to make noise with the doors or the fence gate. I went into my backyard, scanning slowly with the flashlight off at first. I stood there for a long moment. I could hear a faint breathing sound, but I might have been imagining it. Then a bark came from behind my fence. I turned on the flashlight and went out through the side gate, stepping onto the narrow strip of grass that runs behind my property line. There's a chain-link fence there that separates my place from a small patch of undeveloped land with weeds, wild grass, and some low brush. There's a street lamp far off in the distance, but it doesn't light up much of that area. I pointed my flashlight at the ground, looking for footprints or any sign of a dog. I saw flattened grass, maybe from an animal that had been lying there. It looked fresh. I moved the beam around, scanning the darkness. I heard a rustle. It sounded like something shifting weight on dry leaves. I aimed the flashlight at the noise. I saw something crouching. It looked too big to be a normal dog. It was low to the ground, but I could see the outline of a head and shoulders that looked strange. I couldn't see fur. The skin looked grayish or maybe just dull under the beam. It turned its head toward me. Its eyes reflected the light, but not with the usual glow you see in a dog's eyes at night. These were dull, not shining, just reflecting a bit in an uneven way. I didn't say anything. I didn't move closer. My heart was beating hard and I felt sweat on my forehead. I gripped the flashlight tighter. The creature made a soft, low sound. Not exactly a growl, but some kind of grunt. Then it barked. I jumped slightly and stepped back. It didn't run off. It stayed crouched, watching me. I noticed that the shape of its body was weird. The limbs looked too long. The back legs were bent at an odd angle. I tried to focus the light more directly, but the creature moved. It kind of slid sideways, still low to the ground. Then it disappeared behind a clump of tall grass. I stood there for a minute or two, listening. I could hear distant traffic, the hum of a street lamp, and my own breathing. I heard no more barks. Eventually, I turned off my flashlight and walked back to my yard. I locked the gate behind me, went inside, and sat in my living room, feeling unsettled. I didn't know what I had seen. It was not a normal stray dog. It was something else. But I had no idea what to do about it. The next day, I tried to focus on work. I drank a lot of coffee. I couldn't stop thinking about that thing. I had the urge to tell someone, but I didn't know who. I worried people would laugh or think I was losing it. I ended up not telling anyone. I told myself that maybe it was just a weird-looking dog, maybe sick or injured. Maybe I saw it at a bad angle. But deep down, I knew it wasn't right. That night, I turned off all the lights in the house and waited in the dark. I sat on the floor near my back door, my ear against the thin wood, listening. Around the same time, the barking started again. This time, I jumped up and grabbed my flashlight and a large, heavy wrench I kept on a shelf. I went outside and crept along the fence line again, careful not to make much noise. I heard rustling again, and this time I shone the flashlight immediately into the brush. I saw movement, but I couldn't get a good look. I tried to approach the fence, and the creature stood up slightly. It kind of rose on its back legs for a moment, then dropped down again. It was definitely not a normal animal. The shape was wrong. The front limbs seemed too long, and the head was strange. I caught a glimpse of a face that was flat and pale. The mouth opened, and I saw teeth. They looked sharp. The creature barked again, but it sounded forced, like it knew what a bark should sound like, but couldn't quite do it right. I stood there, heart pounding, gripping the wrench. I didn't dare climb the fence or get too close. The creature paced a bit behind the grass. I could see its outline shifting. It breathed heavily, making a steady rasping sound. I noticed a smell, kind of like damp earth and old leaves, but also a hint of something else, maybe a faint rotten odor. I wanted to leave, but I also wanted to see more, to know what it was. I stepped closer, shining the flashlight right at it. The creature flinched at the light and backed off a few steps. I could see something like loose skin on its neck or maybe uneven patches of fur. It opened its mouth again, showing teeth, and let out a short, sharp bark. I took another step forward, and it moved quickly to the side and vanished into the darkness. I heard it push through some bushes, and then I heard nothing. I went back inside, locked the door, and sat down. I was shaking a bit. My throat felt dry. I poured some tap water into a glass and drank it slowly. My heart was still going fast. I didn't know what to call that thing. It looked like some messed up animal, but not like anything normal. Its barking sounded fake, like it was imitating a dog. Why would it hang around here every night? I wondered if it was looking for something. Maybe food. Maybe it just wandered in from the wild land beyond the lots. I had never heard about strange animals around here, though. It was a pretty ordinary place with mostly small homes and fenced yards. Over the next few nights, I tried different strategies. I tried staying completely silent, just peeking out through a gap in the fence. I caught a glimpse of it from behind once. I saw its back. It had a hunched spine and patches of thin, dark hair. The rest of its body looked pale. It kept making those barking sounds at intervals, as if testing something. I tried whistling once, but it didn't react. I tried tossing a small rock into the brush to see if it would move. It only crouched lower. It seemed cautious, but not exactly afraid. It never came into my yard. It always stayed just beyond my fence. I noticed that the barking always started around the same time, roughly midnight or a bit after. It lasted maybe an hour or two, on and off. Then it stopped. I never saw it leave. It just stopped making noise, and eventually I realized I couldn't hear it anymore. Maybe it moved away silently. Maybe it just stayed still until I gave up watching. I started feeling paranoid. I blocked my windows with old blankets to prevent any light from leaking out. I turned off my phone's screen brightness so it wouldn't glow in the dark. I tried to catch the creature off guard. I never managed to see it clearly. Each time it was just a shape, a hint of a face, the outline of limbs that looked too long. Sometimes I thought I saw fingers instead of paws. Once I thought I saw it hold onto a branch to steady itself. The idea of it having hands made me very uncomfortable. After about a week of this, I was exhausted. I decided to call someone. But who would I call? The city doesn't send animal control at night unless it's an emergency. The police wouldn't do much if I just reported a strange animal. I thought about telling a neighbor, but I didn't know them well, and I didn't want to sound crazy, so I kept it to myself. I started sleeping during the day if I could, taking naps after work so I could be alert at night. One night I tried something else. I set up a motion light near the fence. I rigged a small battery-operated light that would turn on if something passed close by. I thought maybe I could startle it into showing itself more fully. Around midnight, the barking began again. I waited inside with my lights off, watching through a small gap in the curtains. After a few barks, I heard rustling and saw the motion light flicker on. For a second, I saw the creature illuminated. It stood on all fours, its spine arched. Its skin looked rough and patchy. It had thin hair along its shoulders. Its head was turned toward my fence. I saw its face more clearly this time. It had a flat nose and a wide mouth with uneven teeth. Its eyes were small and dark. Then it jerked its head toward the light, maybe noticing it. It backed away, stepping awkwardly. I saw that its front limbs looked like arms. They bent like elbows, and the back limbs bent like legs, but not like a dog's hind legs. More like a person crouching. It lowered itself and disappeared into the dark again. I realized then that it might not be just some odd animal. It moved too strangely. It barked like it was trying to produce a sound it learned from somewhere. I felt sick to my stomach. My hands were shaking. I went to the bathroom and splashed water on my face. I could feel sweat under my arms. I kept quiet, listening. After the motion light went off, I heard a few more barks, weaker this time. Then silence. The next day, I considered leaving for a few nights, maybe staying at a friend's place. But I couldn't just run away. I wanted to understand what was going on. That night, I tried yelling. When the barking started, I opened my back door and shouted, "Hey!" I said it loudly, trying to sound angry. The barking stopped for a moment. I shouted again, "Go away!" I waited. The barking resumed, softer. I picked up a metal pipe I had in the garage and banged it against the fence, making a loud noise. The barking stopped. I heard movement, then quiet. I waited for a long time. The barking didn't start again that night. I thought maybe I scared it off. But the following night, the barking returned. I tried the same tactic, shouting, making noise. It didn't stop this time. It just kept barking at intervals. I went out again, flashlight in hand. I tried shining it everywhere, looking through the chain-link fence. I caught a glimpse of it several yards away, behind some shrubs. It was sitting almost upright, holding onto a branch with a hand-like limb. It barked once more. I shouted again, "Leave me alone!" It turned its head slightly, then moved off, crawling on all fours out of sight. Over the next few days, I tried ignoring it. I tried sleeping with earplugs. The barking still broke through. I tried playing music quietly. It didn't help. I took short naps whenever I could to cope with the lack of sleep. I got used to the routine. At night, I would listen, wait for the barking, and then either try to ignore it or step outside to shine a light. I never found tracks that made sense. I never found droppings or fur, just flattened grass and an occasional disturbed patch of dirt. Eventually, I stopped trying to figure it out. I just accepted that there was something out there that I didn't understand. It never attacked me. It never came into my yard. It stayed in its place, barking at night, showing itself only when I tried to see it. I gave up on driving it away. The barking kept coming every night, and I learned to sleep in short bursts or just endure the fatigue. I still think about what it might be, but I have no proof of anything. I only have those nighttime encounters, the smell of damp earth, the sight of that hunched shape, the sound of that strange forced bark. I don't know what it wants. I don't know why it chose my fence line. I just know it's out there, and I can't stop it. So I keep my flashlight close, lock my doors, and wait for sunrise, night after night. I was driving alone late at night, heading back home on a nearly empty highway. The road was flat, straight, and completely silent. There were no other cars, no lights on the horizon, and the sky was dark without any sign of a moon. I had my headlights on low beam because there was no one to blind, and I tried to keep my eyes on the center line to avoid drifting. I was tired, but not sleepy. I just wanted to get home and drop into bed. As I moved forward, I saw someone walking on the shoulder of the road on the right side. It was a man wearing dark clothes, moving at a slow pace. His back was to me. I couldn't see his face. He looked thin and a bit hunched. The way he moved looked stiff. At first, I considered slowing down. Maybe he was in trouble. But this area was known for nothing. Just dry fields and abandoned shacks far from the main towns. Nobody normal walked out here at this hour. I decided it was none of my business and passed him. I drove by him at maybe 40 miles per hour. He was walking so slowly that it felt wrong. I glanced at him as I passed. I saw short, dark hair and a pale neck, but no real details. He didn't turn to look at me. He didn't react. It was just a quiet figure on the side of the highway. I shrugged it off and kept going. A minute later, I noticed something strange up ahead. My headlights caught another figure on the right side of the road. As I got closer, my stomach tightened. It looked like the same man, same stance, same slow steps, same dark clothes. He was a little hunched over, as if tired. But how could he be here again? I had just passed him less than a mile back. There was no way he could have outrun my car. There were no turns or shortcuts. There was nowhere to hide and reappear. My throat felt dry. I swallowed, gripped the wheel, and kept my foot on the gas. When I reached him this time, I slowed slightly and opened my window an inch, trying to hear if he said anything. He didn't. He just kept moving. I noticed he wore worn-out pants and a thin jacket. His shoes looked dirty, as if he had been walking a long time, but there was no sign of sweat or heavy breathing. Still, I didn't see his face. I only saw the back of his head, his short, dark hair, and the back of his jacket. I passed him again and sped up, going at least 50 miles per hour. I kept checking my mirrors. Nothing behind me. Nothing on the fields around. I turned on the radio for comfort, but there was no reception. Just static. So I turned it off and listened to the hum of the engine. My heart was beating faster than normal. I wiped my forehead with my sleeve, noticing I was sweating a bit even though it wasn't hot. I tried to be logical. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe the first man and the second man were different people. Maybe it was some weird coincidence. I tried to calm down and focus on the road, but a few minutes later, I saw him again. The same posture, same slow steps, a head on the shoulder. I pressed the brakes hard, slowing the car down to a crawl. I could feel a heaviness in my stomach. My breathing got shallow. I wanted to turn around and go back, but where would I go? The nearest town was behind me by several miles. The next one ahead was even farther. I was stuck. There was only this empty stretch of road and this strange man appearing again and again. This time I stopped the car about 20 feet behind him. I left the engine running and clicked on my hazard lights, hoping that maybe he would notice me. I leaned out the window and called out, "Hey!" My voice sounded shaky. I waited, but he didn't turn around. He kept walking. His shoulders moved slightly with each step, but nothing else changed. I got out of the car. My legs felt stiff and my hands were shaking a bit. I took a few steps toward him. The gravel on the shoulder crunched under my shoes. I could smell dust in the air. I called out again, "Hey man, what's going on?" No answer. I walked closer. My heart was pounding, and I could feel sweat on my back. I stopped about 6 feet behind him. He kept moving at the same slow pace. I could see his jacket was old and torn near the bottom. I saw a tiny tear on the right shoulder. His hair was short and neat, but it didn't look styled. I reached out and said, "Dude, can you hear me?" Still nothing. I considered touching him, but something held me back. I felt a heaviness in my arms and a cold feeling in my chest. Instead, I stepped back. I moved around and tried to see his face from the side as I walked backward. But as soon as I tried to get a diagonal view, he seemed to angle himself so I never got a good look. I stumbled back to the car, keeping my eyes on him. I got in, locked the doors, and sat there breathing hard. He just kept walking ahead, slowly, steadily. I didn't know what else to do. I didn't have cell service out here, so calling anyone was pointless. I told myself to just drive around him again and keep going. Maybe he would vanish at some point. I pulled back onto the road and passed him once more. I didn't look at him this time. I faced forward and pressed the accelerator. My car felt safe. The tires hummed on the asphalt, and my headlights illuminated the nothingness ahead. The night was quiet except for my engine. I checked the rear-view mirror. I saw him shrinking into the distance behind me. After a while, he was gone from sight. I kept going. 10 minutes later, my jaw clenched. Up ahead, I saw a figure again. It was him. There was no doubt. Same jacket, same shoes, same slow dragging steps. I whispered to myself, "This is impossible." My voice echoed inside the car. I hit the brakes and stopped in the middle of the road. I turned off the engine and listened. Absolute silence. I could barely see him in the dim light now that I had turned off the car's headlights. I turned them back on, and he was still there, about 50 feet ahead. I felt a wave of panic in my chest. I noticed my hands shaking more. My forehead was damp. I wiped it and took deep breaths. I thought about turning around and going back the way I came, even if it meant a much longer drive home. I backed up the car, feeling the tension in my shoulders. I made a U-turn carefully. The headlights swept across the empty fields. When I was facing the opposite direction, I pressed the gas pedal and headed back. The idea was to get away from whatever this was. I drove for maybe 5 minutes, feeling a bit calmer as I moved in the opposite direction. The road behind me looked identical. Asphalt, shoulder, empty fields. But then my heart sank again. In the distance, my headlights revealed a figure walking on the shoulder. It was him again. Now he was ahead of me on the same side of the road, walking away from me. Somehow he was blocking both directions. I slammed the brakes and my tires squealed. I cursed under my breath. I wanted to scream, but I held it in. I moved slowly forward. He never turned around. He never changed pace. It was like he was stuck in a loop. I tried honking the horn this time. The sound was sharp and loud. It hurt my ears in the silence. He didn't react at all. I honked again, longer. Still nothing. He just kept moving. I pressed the horn and held it down. The sound filled my car and the empty surroundings, but he ignored it completely. I let go of the horn and felt my heart beating too fast. I was breathing through my mouth, my throat dry. I considered getting out again, but I was afraid. I felt a tightness in my chest and a strange tension in my legs. My head felt hot. My palms were damp on the wheel. I checked the glove compartment. I didn't have anything useful. No weapon, no flashlight besides the one on my phone. No phone signal anyway. Just me and this never-ending figure. I decided to drive past him again, this time swerving into the left lane to keep maximum distance. As I rolled past, I tried again to see his face. I leaned over the passenger seat, keeping one hand on the wheel. But all I got was a glimpse of a pale cheek and maybe the edge of an ear. He kept his head angled down and forward. It felt like he was avoiding my gaze. I drove on. I forced myself to keep going and ignore him. I told myself to treat him like a hallucination. Just keep driving until I reached a real town with a gas station or a diner, something with people. I would find help there. I would ask them to come back with me. I would show them. They would see it too, or maybe they wouldn't, and I would find out I was losing my mind. But at least I would not be alone. The miles ticked by slowly. The darkness was oppressive. I turned on the car's interior light for a moment, just to see my own face in the rearview mirror. I looked tired with wide eyes and sweat on my forehead. I turned the light off and focused on the road again. Another 10 minutes. I saw him again. Same man, same posture, a head on the shoulder. I slammed my fist on the steering wheel and shouted, "Come on!" My voice echoed in the car. I felt anger mixing with my fear. My legs were shaking. I pressed the gas pedal harder, flying by him. I didn't even look. I just felt my heart pounding and my breathing ragged. I kept driving, now at about 60 miles per hour. There was no point in going slower. He would appear no matter what. I saw him again after what felt like another eternity on that empty road. The same spot on the shoulder. The same slow steps. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles hurt. This time I didn't slow down. I rolled down my window all the way, and as I passed I screamed, "Who the hell are you?" My voice broke a bit at the end. No answer. No reaction. I kept going. I started to notice that every few minutes he would appear. Each time he looked exactly the same. Nothing changed about him. His clothes were always the same. His steps were always the same. He never got tired. He never sped up. He never slowed down. It was like a loop. I thought about stopping and waiting for daylight, but that might take hours. And I didn't want to be stuck here with him. I thought about leaving the car and walking into the fields, but I had no idea what was out there. Just darkness and silence. No lights anywhere. No houses, no signs, no nothing. I tried turning on the radio again, hoping to catch any signal, any human voice. Nothing. Just static. I tried my phone one more time. No signal. The battery was still okay, but it didn't matter. I was isolated. I drove back and forth a few times, testing something. I would go forward until I saw him. Then I would turn around and drive back until I saw him again. No matter which way I went, he was always ahead of me, always walking in the same direction I was driving, always ignoring me. After an hour of this madness, I felt exhausted. My shoulders ached from tension. My eyes burned from staring into the darkness. My heart still beat fast, and my mouth felt dry. I tried to drink some water from a bottle I had on the passenger seat. It was warm and stale, but it helped a bit. Eventually, I decided to try something else. I pulled over, got out of the car, and walked toward him again. This time, I had my phone flashlight on. He was about 30 feet ahead. I approached slowly, shining the light on his back. His jacket looked brown under the beam. I noticed dust on his shoulders and small stains on his pants. I listened hard, trying to hear breathing or footsteps. All I heard was a faint shuffle as his shoes touched the ground. I moved closer, my heart pounding in my ears. I lifted the flashlight and tried to step to the side to see his face. I moved quickly. For a split second, I saw part of his cheek and his eye. His eye looked normal. Just an eye. Brown, I think. But the moment I tried to get a full look, he seemed to shift position smoothly. I stumbled back, losing my footing for a second. He kept walking away. I reached out with my hand and tried to grab his shoulder. My fingers touched fabric for a moment. It felt like a normal jacket, rough and worn, but as soon as I closed my hand, there was nothing there. It felt like he slipped forward just enough that I missed. I tried again. I lunged toward him, my arm outstretched. I ended up grabbing empty air and almost fell forward. My heart pounded. I felt my chest tightening. My breathing was shallow and fast. I turned around and ran back to the car. I slammed the door and locked it. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw nothing behind me. I turned my head forward, and there he was again, ahead on the road, still walking away. I didn't know what else to do. I felt trapped. My body was tired. My mind was racing. I pushed the gas pedal and drove toward him one more time. As I got closer, I turned the wheel and tried to go around him on the left. He stayed on the shoulder. I passed him and kept going. For the next hour, I just kept driving. He appeared at intervals, always ahead. I passed him again and again. I tried not to look at him. I focused on the road lines, on my speedometer, on the feeling of the wheel in my hands. I just kept moving forward, hoping something would change. Then, after what felt like a long time, I noticed the sky was getting slightly lighter. Dawn was coming. The darkness was lifting. I didn't see him again. As the faint light spread over the fields, I realized that the shoulder ahead was empty. No one was there. I kept driving and soon I saw a distant building. It looked like a small gas station or maybe a rest stop. I pressed the accelerator, my hands trembling on the wheel. When I finally reached that building, the sun was just below the horizon, and the emptiness of the night was gone. I parked and got out. My legs were stiff, and my body felt drained. The place was run down, but it had a working phone inside. I called a friend to come get me. I didn't say much about what happened. I just waited by my car, checking the road. Nobody was there. It was quiet and empty again. I never figured out who that man was or how he kept getting ahead of me. But I didn't see him again, and I never took that route alone at night after that. I didn't need answers. I was just relieved it was over. I remember walking into the building lobby late in the afternoon. The place was quiet and almost empty. I needed to go up to a certain floor to pick up a document. I wasn't thinking about anything unusual. I was just tired and wanted to finish my errand quickly. The elevator doors opened and no one else was inside. I stepped in, pressed my floor number, and waited. There was a gentle hum as the elevator started moving upward. The ride seemed normal. After a few seconds, the elevator slowed and stopped earlier than my chosen floor. The doors slid open. I looked into the hallway. There were no people waiting. I saw no feet, no shadows, no movement. It was quiet. I couldn't hear anyone approaching. I waited a moment. No one stepped inside. I thought maybe the elevator had stopped by mistake or someone had pressed the button but walked away. I reached toward the control panel to press the close door button. Suddenly, I felt it. A shift in the air. A slight movement inside the elevator. The kind of feeling you get when someone steps past you, their body displacing the air. I heard no footsteps, no breathing, nothing. But it felt as if another person had just entered. It was like the weight of the room changed. I couldn't see anyone. The hallway still looked empty. The doors closed on their own. I felt my stomach tighten. I looked around inside the elevator. Just me and empty space. The walls, the buttons, the overhead lights, my reflection on the brushed metal surface. Nothing else. I stood there, uncertain. Maybe it was my imagination. I tried to steady myself, focusing on the floor numbers as the elevator resumed moving. As the elevator rose, I tried ignoring the odd feeling, but it lingered. I couldn't shake the sense that I was not alone. I moved slightly, shifting my weight. I listened carefully. Nothing. I didn't see anyone, but I felt someone or something close. I stepped toward the control panel, pressed my floor button again as if to confirm. The elevator kept going. Everything looked normal. The panel lit up as expected. Then, the elevator stopped again at another floor. The doors opened. This time I put my head out into the hallway. Still no one there. I called out, "Hello?" No response. I listened for footsteps. Silence. Suddenly, as I tried to step back inside, I felt pressure. Something blocked my path. It felt like a person standing in the doorway. But I saw no one. I moved my arm through the space. My arm stopped against something solid, yet invisible. I could feel fabric like clothing. I could feel resistance. But my eyes saw only empty air. I panicked and tried stepping back. The presence moved inside with me, forcing me away from the doorway. The doors closed. I was trapped with it. I backed against the elevator wall. My heart was pounding and I could feel sweat building on my palms. I pressed the emergency call button. No sound, no response. I tried the alarm bell. Nothing happened. I pressed all the floor buttons, hoping the elevator would stop at the next floor and I could jump out. The presence stood between me and the door, blocking any escape. I could feel it there, so close, yet I saw nothing at all. I tried talking. "Who are you? What do you want?" No reply. I reached out carefully. My hand touched something like a shoulder. It felt solid. I tried pushing it. It pushed back, harder. I stepped to the side, trying to slip past it. I felt an arm or something pressing into my chest, shoving me back toward the rear wall. I stumbled and nearly fell. I tried pressing the open door button again, over and over. The elevator ignored me. It continued moving, but I couldn't tell if we were going up or down. My stomach felt heavy and my breathing was shallow. I tried yelling for help. My voice sounded desperate and loud in the cramped space. No one answered. The presence remained silent. I swung my arm through the air, hoping to hit something. I made contact with what felt like a torso. It felt like punching a solid human body. In response, it grabbed my arm. I felt strong fingers dig into my flesh, twisting my arm until I cried out in pain. I stopped struggling, and it released me. I leaned against the wall, rubbing my arm. I tried pressing the emergency intercom button again. No sound came. I tried the elevator's phone panel, pulling it open. The phone was there, but no dial tone. Dead. I slammed it back in frustration. I needed to get out. I tried reaching up to the ceiling hatch. It was locked. I pulled and pried, but it wouldn't budge. The presence stood beneath me, holding my leg at one point, preventing me from climbing. I kicked out, hitting something solid. It retaliated by pushing me hard into the wall. My head hit the metal and I saw spots for a second. I touched the door seams, trying to pry them open with my fingers. I managed to get a small gap. I put all my strength into pulling, feeling my nails strain. The presence grabbed my arm and twisted it away. The pain made me let go. I tried again and again. Each time it stopped me with brute force. I took out my phone. No signal. I tried anyway. Nothing. I turned on the flashlight and shined it around. Nothing unusual, just an empty elevator. But when I moved the light around where I felt the presence, it showed nothing. I swung my keys in front of me, and they struck something invisible. The keys stopped in midair. I felt the tug as the presence tried to knock them from my hand. Eventually it succeeded, and my keys clattered to the floor. I snatched them back quickly. I pressed myself into a corner, trying to think. I couldn't see it, couldn't reason with it. It wouldn't speak. It only responded with force. I tried slowly approaching the door. The elevator stopped once more. The doors opened slightly, revealing a hallway. I lunged forward, trying to slip out. The presence slammed me back inside, the door closing. I yelled at it, cursed at it, but it stood silent. I punched the wall, feeling the pain in my knuckles. I tried again with the alarm button. The elevator kept moving. My heart was racing. I could feel sweat dripping down my back. My shirt stuck to my skin. My mouth felt dry. I tried to calm down and conserve energy, but it was hard. I kept glancing around, my eyes finding no answer, just that heavy feeling of someone standing right there. I had to try something else. I approached the control panel and pried at a small panel beneath it with my keys. I got it open a bit, revealing wires. I pulled one at random. The elevator jerked and the lights flickered. The presence hit my hand, making me drop the keys inside the panel. I cursed and tried to reach in, but the presence pulled me back. I felt its grip on my shoulder, tight and painful. I tried kicking the panel. The presence grabbed my wrist and twisted it, forcing me to stop. I cried out and stopped. My wrist throbbed. I leaned against the wall again, breathing hard. The elevator continued its silent journey, ignoring my inputs. "Just let me out," I said, my voice trembling. No answer. I tried every button again systematically. Nothing worked. I banged on the doors, the walls, the ceiling. The presence let me do that, as long as I didn't try to escape or mess with the panel again. After a while, the elevator slowed and stopped. The doors opened a crack. I could see a hallway outside. This might be my best chance. I rushed forward, pushing with all my strength. The presence met me halfway, blocking me. I fought back hard, swinging my arms. I made contact. I felt it pushing me, but I braced myself against the door frame. My shoulder and arm strained as I tried to force my way through the small opening. I managed to get one arm and half my torso out into the hallway. I felt fresh air on my face. The presence pulled at my legs, grabbing my ankle. I kicked back wildly. My shoe connected with something solid. The grip loosened. I used the moment to push myself further out. My back scraped against the door frame, but I didn't care. I had to get free. The presence grabbed my shirt, pulling me back. I held onto the hallway door frame, my fingers slipping. I realized I had to outsmart it. I let go for a second, then lunged forward again, using the sudden movement to gain a few inches. The fabric of my shirt tore slightly. I ignored it and kept pulling myself forward. I got my other shoulder through. Now my waist was halfway out. The presence yanked at my leg again. I kicked down, making contact. It released me. I took advantage and pulled the rest of my body out. I fell onto the hallway floor, scraping my knee. I scrambled to my feet and grabbed a nearby handrail, pulling myself fully out of the elevator. My heart hammered in my chest. I heard no sound behind me, just my own heavy breathing. When I turned around, the elevator doors started to close. I reached for the call button in the hallway. The doors opened again. I looked inside. Empty. Just a regular elevator, bright lights. Nothing unusual. No sign of the invisible figure. I stared inside, searching with my eyes. Nothing. I stepped back, my hands shaking. I tried pressing the elevator's panel outside to call it again. The doors closed, then opened normally. Still empty. I stood there for a moment, catching my breath. My body ached where I had been grabbed and pushed. My wrist and arm hurt. My head throbbed. But I was out. I was free. I didn't bother trying the elevator again. I didn't care about my errand anymore. I was done. I saw a sign for the stairwell. I walked towards it, looking over my shoulder, half expecting something to follow me. But nothing came. I opened the stairwell door, stepped inside, and started descending. I needed to get out of that building and away from whatever was in that elevator. As I walked down the stairs, I could still feel the lingering touch of those invisible hands, the silent, solid body that wouldn't let me leave. I reached the lobby eventually, passed through the doors, and stepped outside. The air felt different, open and free. I never understood what happened in that elevator. I never saw anything written about it later. Nobody told me they had a similar experience. I never reported it. I just never went back into that building's elevator again. If I had to go there, I would take the stairs every time. I reached the sidewalk and felt the tension still in my shoulders. My clothes were damp with sweat, and my hands shook a bit. But I was alive, and I was outside. I stood there for a while, breathing, looking at the building's facade, trying to make sense of it. Then I decided there was nothing to understand. It just happened. I walked away, grateful to be out. I was sitting at my desk in the small room I use as an office. It was late, probably around 2 in the morning, maybe a bit later. I had all the lights on because I hate working in dim light, and I had my laptop open with some documents scattered around the table. My back was to the window. I had not bothered to close the blinds because I usually don't see anything outside at that hour. There are no street lights right behind my house. There are just a few shrubs and some fencing. It's mostly just darkness out there. But that night I glanced at the window when I leaned back in my chair. I saw my reflection, and I saw someone else's reflection behind me. Someone or something that looked humanoid. I froze. My heart started beating harder. I turned around right away. There was no one there. The room was empty. I looked at the chair behind me. It was just a chair. There were some boxes in the corner, but no person there. I looked under the table, behind the door, even though that made no sense. Nothing. Then I looked back at the window. The figure was still there. It was right behind me in the reflection. It looked like a person-shaped shadow standing completely still. I saw no face. It was like a dark outline, taller than me, maybe by a few inches. I stared at it. I tried to make out more details. I couldn't see any clothes, hair, or features. just a form that resembled a human body. The shoulders, the head, the way it stood, it looked solid and not like some random shape. I could see my own reflection clearly. I could see my desk, my chair, and behind me, that figure. Yet when I turned around, I saw nothing. I stood up, feeling uneasy. My mouth felt dry. I walked closer to the window, facing it head on. I tried to line myself up with my reflection. The figure in the reflection did not move. It stayed right behind where I would be if I sat down. I put my hand on the glass. It felt cold. I tried to see if maybe there was something stuck to the outside of the window. I couldn't see anything out there. I looked at the reflection again. The figure was still there. I felt this tightness in my chest. I took a deep breath. I told myself to calm down. There had to be an explanation. I turned around again, slowly this time, making sure I wasn't missing anything. The room was quiet. I had a faint hum from my laptop's fan. I could hear a quiet buzzing from a light bulb in a lamp on my desk. The rest of the house was silent. I looked everywhere. There was nowhere a full-sized person could hide. The door was closed, and it's a solid wooden door. There's no closet in here. Just the desk, a chair, and some boxes in the corner. I touched the boxes. They were solid and hadn't moved. I ran a hand along the walls, feeling like an idiot. Of course, no one was there. I took a few steps back and looked at the window again. The reflection showed the same scene. Me, my desk, and that figure behind me. I waved my hand in front of me. My reflection copied the movement perfectly. The figure behind me did not move at all. It just stood there. I tried stepping sideways to the left and right to see if the figure would shift. It stayed in the same place relative to me, always behind me, a bit off to one side. It was like it was watching me, but I couldn't see its eyes or face. I decided to turn off the light for a moment just to see what happened. I found the switch on the wall and flicked it off. The room went dark except for the faint light from the laptop screen. I let my eyes adjust. In the darkness, I could still see a bit of my reflection because of the laptop's glow. The figure was still there, a darker shape in the background. I flicked the light back on, now feeling a bit sick to my stomach. I stood there for a minute, unsure of what to do. I thought about grabbing my phone and taking a picture. Maybe it was some weird reflection of something outside. I unlocked my phone and aimed the camera at the window. I tried to focus the camera on the glass. I snapped a few pictures. I looked at them on my phone's screen. I could see my reflection and the window frame. I didn't see the figure in the photos. It wasn't showing up in the pictures. I took more photos at different angles. The figure never appeared, but I could still see it with my own eyes. Every time I looked at the window, it was there, in the reflection. I felt my heart thumping in my chest. My palms were sweaty. I wiped them on my pants. I started to breathe through my mouth. I tried to stay calm. I thought maybe I should leave the room, go to another part of the house. I opened the door and stepped out into the hallway. I left the lights on inside the room. I looked from the hallway back into the room. Nothing out of place, just my desk, my chair, the window at the far end. I could see the reflection faintly from the doorway. The figure was still there behind where I would be if I was inside. I walked down the hallway to the living room. I turned on all the lights. I paced around for a bit, thinking about what I had seen. I felt stupid calling the police over a weird reflection. They would think I was drunk or on something. I wasn't drinking, though. I was just working. I grabbed a glass of water from the kitchen, drank it, and splashed some water on my face. The water felt cold. It helped me focus. I went back to the hallway and looked into the office again. The figure's reflection was still there. I decided to try another approach. I went outside through the front door and walked around the side of the house to see the window from the outside. It was dark and chilly outside. I could feel the cold air on my arms. I walked carefully, looking for footprints or something near the window. The ground was dry. I stepped up close to the window and looked in. From the outside, I just saw my office. I saw the chair, the desk, the boxes. I saw no figure inside. I didn't see anything unusual. I tapped lightly on the glass from outside. Nothing happened. I looked around the yard. It was empty. I checked the fence line. Everything looked normal. I heard a distant car passing by on the main road, but nothing else. I walked back inside, locking the door behind me. I was getting more nervous. I had no explanation. I returned to the office and looked at the window again. The figure was still in the reflection. Now I tried to stand in different spots in the room. If I stood near the desk, the figure appeared behind me in the reflection. If I moved closer to the window, I could still see it behind me. It always looked like it was at a fixed point in the room, but when I moved, it stayed behind me. I tried standing all the way to the left side of the room and then the right. The figure's position changed as if it always kept the same relative angle behind me. It never moved on its own. It never raised an arm or bent its head. It was just a static shape. I felt the hair on my arm standing up. My stomach felt tense. My head was pounding. I kept asking myself what this thing could be. I tried to think of anything that could cause a strange reflection. Some object outside, a weird shape caused by a combination of lights. But there was nothing outside, just an empty yard and a fence. No lights that could cast a shape like that. I reached out and touched the window again, pressing my fingertips against the glass. I ran my hand along it, feeling for any imperfections. It felt smooth and cold. I breathed slowly, trying not to panic. I looked at my own face in the reflection. I looked at my eyes, my nose, my mouth. I looked at my shoulders, my hair, my shirt. All of that was correct. It looked like a normal reflection, except for that figure behind me. That figure did not match anything in the room. I could not see it in real life, only in the reflection. I pulled the blinds down and covered the window completely. Now I faced a white curtain of blinds. The reflection disappeared because I could no longer see the glass. I felt some relief at that, but it was temporary. If I lifted the blinds again, would the figure still be there? I waited a minute or two, just standing there, breathing. I considered leaving the blinds down and just going to bed. But I knew I wouldn't sleep well. I had to check again. I wanted to know if it was still there. I raised the blinds slowly and looked at the window. My reflection returned. The figure was still there. It had not moved. It was like it was waiting. My hands were shaking. I sat down in my chair, facing the window, watching the figure in the reflection. I tried to speak to it quietly, even though I felt stupid doing so. I said, "Hello?" in a low voice. I waited. Nothing happened. The figure did not respond. I listened carefully to the room. I heard nothing unusual, just my laptop's fan and the slight hum of electricity in the lights. I got up and turned off the laptop's screen to reduce any glare. The reflection got dimmer, but I could still see the figure behind me. I turned off the lamp on the desk. Now the room was lit only by the ceiling light. The figure was still visible. Its presence was not affected by the brightness level. I turned all the lights off in the room and turned on the hallway light instead. I looked back in. The figure was still there, darker, but present. I started to feel a kind of tension in my chest, like I wanted to leave the house entirely. But I also felt drawn to this strange situation. I could not understand what was happening. I decided to try something else. I grabbed a piece of paper and held it behind me while looking at the reflection. I wanted to see if the figure would become partially blocked. I held the paper up, moving it around. My reflection showed me holding a piece of paper behind myself. The figure still appeared as if it was behind the paper, unchanged. It was not affected by objects I introduced. I tried standing so close to the window that my reflection almost filled the entire glass. The figure still managed to appear behind me, as if it shrank or positioned itself perfectly to remain visible. This made me feel even more uneasy. I began to sweat. I wiped my forehead with my sleeve. My breathing got shallow. I tried to slow it down. I pulled the blinds down again and left them down. I decided I would not look at that window anymore. I backed away, turned off the light, and left the room. But after standing in the hallway for a few minutes, I felt like I needed to check again. I went back inside and lifted the blinds a bit to peek. The figure was still there. I let the blinds fall closed. My throat felt tight. I took my phone and tried calling a friend. It rang a few times, no answer. It was late after all. I didn't leave a message. I didn't know what to say anyway. I thought about calling the police, but what would I tell them? There was no intruder, just a strange reflection that only I could see. They would say it was a prank or my imagination. I wasn't hallucinating. I was sure of that. I could see everything else clearly. I could touch things, feel things. The only oddity was in that window. I went to the kitchen and grabbed a small flashlight. I returned to the office and shone the flashlight at the glass. I tried different angles, but the figure remained unchanged. It was like it did not depend on the lighting. The flashlight beam showed me dust on the glass, some smudges, but nothing that explained the figure. I decided to block the reflection entirely. I took a sheet of cardboard from one of the boxes and taped it over the window from the inside. Now I could not see anything in the glass. The cardboard covered it completely. I stood there for a moment, staring at the cardboard, half expecting it to show some shape, but it was just cardboard. I tapped on it. I knocked lightly. Nothing happened. I waited a while, just listening. I heard my own breathing, a slight ringing in my ears from the silence. After a few minutes, I felt calmer. The figure was out of sight, at least. If I couldn't see it, I didn't have to deal with it. I turned off the lights and left the office. I locked the door out of habit, even though that made little sense. I moved to the living room and sat on the couch. I tried to think about something else, but every time I closed my eyes, I pictured that dark shape. It didn't do anything. It just stood there in the reflection. I couldn't understand why. I tried to recall if I had noticed anything strange before that night. I hadn't. Everything seemed normal until I looked at that window. I considered sleeping in the living room. It was late, and I was tired, but I knew I wouldn't sleep easily. My mind kept going back to that figure. It hadn't made any noise or tried to touch me. It was just there, staring at me from the reflection. I wondered if it would still be there the next day. What if it disappeared by morning? I got up and went back to the office door. I listened at the door. Nothing. I opened it and turned on the light. The cardboard still covered the window. I stood in front of it, hesitating. Then I slowly removed the tape and took the cardboard down. I looked at the glass again. My reflection came into view. Behind me, the figure was still there, unchanged. I let out a shaky breath. The figure didn't leave. It didn't do anything. It just waited. I felt sweat trickling down my back. My eyes were dry from staring so long. I lowered the blinds and put the cardboard back up. I left the room and closed the door. I decided that I would not look at it anymore tonight. I would wait until morning and see if something changed. For now, I just wanted to sit in the living room, leave the TV on for some noise, and try to calm down. I walked to the living room, turned on the TV, and turned the volume to a low level. I sat on the couch and tried to listen to the quiet sound. I tried not to think too much. I kept feeling that tightness in my chest. I tapped my foot on the floor, trying to release some tension. After a while, I got up to get another glass of water. My throat was still dry. I drank slowly. The kitchen felt safe. It was quiet, and there were no windows facing that side. I stood there, leaning against the counter. I could feel my heartbeat slowing a bit, but my mind was still racing. I looked at the clock. It was close to 3 in the morning. I decided not to go back to the office for the rest of the night. I turned off a few lights, leaving only the living room lamp on. I lay down on the couch with my phone in my hand, just in case. I thought about calling someone again, but it was too late. I just lay there, listening to the quiet sounds of the house, waiting for morning. I knew that behind that closed office door, covered by cardboard and blinds, the window reflection still had that figure. I couldn't explain it. I couldn't get rid of it. I could only wait and see what happened next. I knew something was wrong with the apartment from the very first day I moved in. The place looked normal enough. An old, two-room unit on the second floor of a building that stood at the end of a quiet street. The walls were a dull off-white. The floors were worn hardwood, and the smell of old varnish and stale air lingered everywhere. There was a small kitchen, a cramped living room, and a single bedroom with a narrow window facing a fire escape. Outside that window, I could see the brick wall of the next building over, which was about 4 feet away. The bathroom was small and had an old toilet with a chain flush. Nothing looked special or strange, but the front door never stayed locked. That was the problem. The first night I tried to lock it, I tested it 3 times. I turned the deadbolt, pressed my shoulder against the door, pulled on the knob, and felt it was secure. I even slid a chain across it. I tested all of it. It was fine. I went to bed feeling a bit uneasy because it was an old building and I was still getting used to it. The guy who rented it to me had said it was cheap because it was old. He didn't mention anything else. The next morning, the door was open. The chain was hanging loose and the deadbolt was disengaged. The door was open about an inch or two, just enough that I saw light in the hall. I stared at it, trying to remember if I had maybe gotten up in the night or forgotten something. But no, I was sure I had locked it. I felt a tightness in my stomach and a heaviness in my chest. I walked over, looked into the hallway, saw nothing but empty space, and closed it again. I locked it carefully, then got on with my day. I just assumed I had made some stupid mistake. That was the first day. The second day, the same thing happened. I began to get annoyed and a bit anxious. I decided to test it more carefully. I locked the door, slid the chain, and then pushed a heavy chair in front of it. I took a picture with my phone. Then I went to bed. I woke up around 7 the next morning and saw that the door was open again. The chair was pushed aside. The chain was off. I looked around the apartment, checking if anything was missing. Nothing was gone, and the apartment looked the same. I checked my phone's camera roll and saw the photo I had taken. The date and time were there, so I knew I hadn't imagined it. I felt my pulse in my neck and some sweat on my palms. I wiped them on my pants and tried to stay calm. I spent the next day on the phone with the landlord. He said he didn't know what I was talking about. He said the door had worked fine for the last tenant. He said maybe I wasn't locking it right. I told him I'd locked plenty of doors in my life and I knew how. He just said he'd come by and look at it. He never did. I decided to get new locks. I went to a hardware store and bought a new deadbolt, a couple of padlocks, and a thick chain. I spent the afternoon replacing the old lock with the new one. I tested them all. I locked and unlocked them a dozen times. I was sure they worked. That night, I set up my old laptop as a makeshift security camera near the kitchen, facing the door. I used a simple webcam program that recorded on motion detection. I wanted proof of what was happening. I went to bed feeling on edge. I left a small lamp on in the living room so I wouldn't have to fumble around in the dark if something happened. I tried to sleep, but every noise made me turn my head. The building's pipes clanked sometimes. The neighbor's TV murmured through the thin walls. Cars passed outside. I checked the time on my phone every hour or so. Eventually, sometime after midnight, I drifted off. I woke up to the sound of the door opening. It was a gentle sound. Just a slight creak, but it was enough to snap my eyes open. My heart pounded. I got out of bed slowly and felt the wooden floor cold under my feet. I moved toward the living room. My mouth felt dry. The small lamp threw a weak light on the door. It was open again, just a crack, and I saw the new locks hanging loose exactly like the old ones had. The chain was undone. The padlocks were on the floor. They weren't broken, just open. My security camera setup was still there. I leaned over, grabbed my laptop, and checked the recording. The webcam had captured nothing. The video showed the door as normal 1 second, and then, the next second, it was open. There was no sound of footsteps. Nothing moved in front of the camera. It was like a jump cut. I played it back several times, leaning close to the screen. Nothing. The door just seemed to open on its own. I locked it again. I felt a slight tremor in my hand as I turned the new deadbolt. I tried to breathe slowly. My throat felt tight. I didn't know what to do. I didn't believe in anything supernatural. I never had. I still don't. But I couldn't explain what was going on. I decided to stay awake until morning, just sitting there in the living room staring at the door. I didn't move from the chair. I waited. Nothing else happened that night. The next day, I tried to talk to the neighbors. Most of them didn't seem to care. They were older people who had lived in the building for a long time. I asked if they ever had trouble with their doors. They said no. One guy just shrugged and said it was an old building. He told me the doors and floors were warped and maybe the locks weren't lining up right, but I knew I had changed the locks myself. Another neighbor said he never heard anything from my apartment. He looked at me like I was bothering him. I went to the building manager's office. It was a small, dusty room on the ground floor. The manager was a middle-aged guy with a tired face. He said if I wanted, he could try to look at the door. He followed me upstairs and tried the locks himself. He said they seemed fine. He said maybe someone had a key. He offered to change the doorknob. I accepted. We changed the doorknob together, and he gave me the only set of keys for the new one. I watched him throw the old knob in a trash bin in the hallway. There was no way anyone else had a copy. That night I set up 2 cameras, one facing the door from the inside, and another one facing the door from the outside, mounted in the hallway. The landlord would probably get mad that I did that, but I needed to see what was going on. I plugged both into my laptop and set them to record continuously. Then I locked the door again with everything I had, the new deadbolt, the chain, and the padlocks. I felt the metal in my hands. It was solid and cold. The chain was thick. The locks were sturdy. I knew they were good because I had tested them. I sat in my living room chair just a few feet from the door. I had a baseball bat on my lap. I didn't even remember where I got it, but it had been in my storage boxes. I held it across my knees, waiting. I felt sweat on my forehead. I wiped it with the back of my hand. The apartment was quiet except for a distant hum from the fridge and the faint traffic outside. I looked through the laptop screen, watching both camera feeds side by side. The hallway outside was empty. My apartment's doorway was quiet. Hours passed. I felt my back getting stiff. My legs were getting sore. I wanted to lie down, but I forced myself to stay awake. I drank some water from the sink. I ate a cracker or 2 from a box in the kitchen. I went back to my chair. I forced my eyes to stay open. The apartment grew colder as the night went on, and I turned the heater knob, but it didn't seem to help much. At around 2 in the morning, I thought I heard something. It wasn't loud. It was like a soft click, almost like a lock turning. I looked at the door. Nothing moved. I looked at the laptop. The outside camera showed the hallway empty. The inside camera showed the door standing still. I leaned forward, gripping the bat. I breathed through my mouth slowly and tried not to make noise. Then the door opened. It opened about an inch, maybe 2. It made a quiet creak. I saw the chain slide free and the padlocks fall to the floor, one after another, making a muffled clank. I saw the deadbolt turn by itself. I was right there, only a few steps away. I saw it happen in front of my eyes. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. I tasted something bitter in my mouth. I felt a pressure in my chest that made it hard to breathe. My hands shook. I tried to stand up holding the bat, but my knees felt weak. I looked at the laptop. The outside feed showed nothing. The hallway was empty. The inside feed showed what I was seeing with my own eyes. The door was opening on its own. There was no one there. I could feel my pulse in my ears. I reached out with the bat and nudged the door. It swung open silently. I saw the empty hallway. The lights were dim. No one was out there. I took a step forward and stood in the doorway. I looked left and right. The hallway was empty, just the same faded wallpaper and old light fixtures. I looked at the hinges of my door. They seemed fine. I looked at the floor. It was flat and stable. I tried to pull the door shut. It closed normally. I locked it again. I slid the chain. I stepped back, still holding the bat. My heart was still hammering. I watched the door for another hour. It stayed closed. Eventually, I fell asleep in the chair. I woke up with a stiff neck and the bat still in my hand. The door was still closed, but all the locks were off again. The next day, I went through the footage on the laptop, frame by frame. I saw the exact moment the door opened. The chain flew back as if someone had moved it. The padlocks clicked open one by one. The deadbolt turned, but there was no one there. The outside camera showed nothing at all. The hallway was empty the whole night. I had proof, but what would I do with it? I called the landlord again and told him he didn't believe me. I offered to show him the video. He said he didn't have time and that if I wanted to break my lease, I could, but he wouldn't give me back my deposit. He sounded tired of my complaints. I talked to a friend on the phone. He told me to leave. I considered it, but I didn't have much money. This place was cheap. Also, I couldn't wrap my head around it. I wanted to know what was going on. I tried another idea. I removed the chain and padlocks entirely and replaced them with a new latch I bought at the hardware store. I even screwed a sliding bolt into the frame. I tested it all. That night, I put the cameras back up. I tried to stay awake again, but at some point I dozed off. I woke up hours later to the sound of the door creaking. I jumped up, ran to it, and found it ajar again. The new latch was on the floor. The sliding bolt was undone. I felt a pain in my stomach that made me want to throw up. I didn't, but I felt shaky. I locked it again, but by now I knew it would never stay locked. The following night I sat down on the floor in front of the door. I had a flashlight and a crowbar. I pressed my ear against the wood, hoping to hear something. I heard nothing. The building was quiet. A pipe rattled now and then. I whispered to myself, trying to calm down. I told myself I just needed a solution. But I didn't know what to do. There was no sign of forced entry. There were no marks on the wood. There was no damage to the locks. They just opened somehow. I ended up grabbing all my stuff and pushing it into the bedroom. I locked myself inside the bedroom and wedged the dresser against the door. The bedroom door had a simple lock, nothing special. I sat on the bed, waiting. I heard the front door open sometime in the early morning, but I didn't go out to check. I just sat there, holding my knees, breathing slowly, trying not to panic. My heart was beating fast, and my hands were sweating again. When morning came, I checked the front door. It was open again. The hallway was empty. I closed it without bothering to lock it. What was the point? It would open anyway. I picked up the phone and called a locksmith. He came by and looked at everything. He said it was fine. He installed another brand new lock, top quality. He charged me a lot for it. I paid because I didn't know what else to do. That night the door opened again. I watched it happen right in front of me. The locksmith's work made no difference. After that I realized I couldn't fight it. I couldn't figure it out either. I stuffed a towel under the door so it wouldn't swing open all the way. That didn't help. The towel would be tossed aside by morning. I tried jamming a chair under the knob. I found the chair moved out of the way every time. I tried stacking boxes against the door. They would be pushed aside. It didn't matter what I did. The door would always open. I didn't sleep well. I felt tired and worn down. My appetite got worse. Every time I tried to relax, I thought about that door. I worried that maybe someone was coming in, but I never saw anyone. Nothing was ever stolen. I tried staying in the hallway at night, waiting for something, but nothing happened while I watched. It only happened when I was inside, half asleep or distracted. In the end, I decided to move out. I packed my things over a couple of days, looking over my shoulder at the door every few minutes. On my last night, I slept in my clothes. I left the door unlocked because it would have opened anyway. I kept one camera rolling, but I knew what I'd see. Nothing. Just that door opening by itself and no one there. The next morning, I carried my boxes downstairs. I looked at the building manager, who just gave me a bored shrug. I stepped out onto the street and started walking. I didn't know where I'd go next, but I knew I wasn't staying here. As I walked away, I could picture the door upstairs. slowly drifting open again with nobody around. I felt a chill on the back of my neck as I turned the corner. I didn't look back. I knew I wouldn't get any answers. I just wanted to get out of there. I was sitting in my home office around midnight, staring at my computer screen, trying to finish some reports for work. The lights in the room were on, but the rest of the house was dark. The street outside was quiet. I was alone at home, and I hadn't spoken to anyone in hours. The silence felt normal until I felt a slight tap on my shoulder. It was a light pressure, just one tap. I turned around fast, expecting to see someone standing there, but there was nothing. I stood up from my chair right after feeling that tap. I glanced behind me, checked my office door, and looked around at the empty space. There was my desk, my chair, the shelves with a few binders, and the small couch in the corner. The door was closed, and I hadn't heard it open. There was no one in the room. My house wasn't big, and I knew no one else was supposed to be inside. I double-checked the windows. They were all closed. I was a bit tense, but I didn't say anything out loud. I just tried to breathe normally. I rubbed my shoulder where I thought I felt that tap. There wasn't any pain, nothing felt strange on my skin. I looked around again. The air felt still. My office lamp was shining on the papers spread out in front of me. Nothing was unusual in my immediate view. I stepped out into the hallway. The hallway light was off, so I flipped the switch. The bulb came on, steady. The hallway looked clear. No furniture had moved. The doors were all closed like I left them. I walked down the hallway, checking each room. My bedroom door was closed. I pressed my ear against it. No sound. I opened it carefully. I looked inside. My bed, my dresser, my closet door shut as normal. Nothing out of place. I didn't smell anything odd. I didn't see any shadows moving. I closed the bedroom door and checked the guest room next. That door was also closed. I opened it, switched on the light, and looked around. Same situation, everything in its place. My old bookshelf, the small desk with nothing on it, the window locked. Nothing strange. I moved to the living room. I turned on a lamp near the couch. The living room was quiet. My TV was off, and it reflected a bit of the lamplight. I stood there listening. The refrigerator in the kitchen made a low hum. I could hear that sound because everything else was silent. I walked into the kitchen, checked the back door. It was locked. I pulled on it to make sure, solid. I checked the window above the sink, locked. I touched the countertops, opened a couple of cabinets, just looking for anything that might explain what happened. Nothing. I returned to the hallway and then back to my office. I left the door open this time. I wanted to keep an eye on my surroundings. I sat down at my desk again, looked at my computer screen, and tried to focus on my work. I typed a few lines, but I was distracted. I kept feeling a slight chill on my neck. There was no draft. My office had no open windows and the heating was on, set to a normal temperature. I leaned back in my chair and listened. I could hear my own breathing, a soft hum from my computer tower, and the quiet electric buzz of the ceiling light. I tapped my fingers on the desk, thinking that maybe I imagined the tap on my shoulder. I considered that maybe I was just tired. It was late, and I had been sitting there for hours. Then I heard a faint sound in the hallway. It sounded like a soft scrape against the wall. I stood up again. I stepped into the hallway, looked around. The lights were on, so I could see the entire space. Nothing. I ran my hand along the wall where I thought the sound came from. The paint felt normal, smooth and cool. I stepped toward my bedroom again, opened the door. Still nothing out of place. I closed the door and stood in the hallway. My heart was beating faster. I pressed my lips together and tried to calm down. I decided to check the front door. I walked to the living room and looked at the door. It was locked. I looked through the peephole. The outside porch light showed the empty front step. No movement. The street was quiet. I did not see any cars going by. The neighbors' lights were off. Everything looked ordinary. I returned to the office. I pushed my chair aside and looked under the desk. Nothing there except the power strip and a few cables. I opened my closet. Inside were some boxes, old binders, and a couple of rolled-up posters. Everything was exactly how I left it. I closed it again and sat down. My skin felt a little sweaty under my shirt. I pressed my hand on my chest and felt my heartbeat. I tried to slow my breathing. I told myself I would just finish the reports quickly and then go to bed. I typed for a while, forcing myself to ignore the feeling that something was off. Then I heard another sound. This time it was a soft tapping. It came from behind me. Not on my shoulder, but on the wall. 3 soft taps, spaced out. I turned around in my chair. I looked at the wall. I got up and pressed my ear against it. I did not hear anything else. I tapped back with my knuckle. The wall felt solid. I waited a moment, but nothing happened. I left the office again and went to the guest room, which shared that wall. I turned on the light and checked the wall on that side. There was a small table and a lamp, both untouched. The window was still locked. I touched the wall. It felt just like any other wall. No vibration, no sound. I stood very still, holding my breath, listening. Nothing. I went back to the living room, sat down on the couch. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, trying to think straight. I did not want to call anyone at this hour. It felt silly. I considered calling the police, but I had no real evidence of anyone else in my home. I decided to try a different approach. I took a flashlight from a kitchen drawer and decided to check every inch of the house. I started in the living room, under the couch, behind the TV stand, behind the curtains. All clear. I checked the kitchen, opened every cabinet, checked under the table, behind the fridge, in the pantry. Nothing. I moved to the bathroom. I pulled back the shower curtain. Empty tub. I checked under the sink. Only cleaning supplies. I checked the hallway closet. Coats, vacuum cleaner, a few boxes. Nothing unusual. I went into my bedroom again, opened the closet, moved the hangers aside. Nothing. I looked under the bed. A few storage boxes, nothing else. I stood there, flashlight in hand, just looking at my bed and dresser. Everything was normal. I felt a little embarrassed with myself. I was searching for something that probably wasn't there. I turned off the bedroom light and closed the door. I headed back toward my office. Just as I reached the doorway, I heard a creak behind me. It was the floorboard near the bathroom. I turned around quickly. The hallway light was still on. I saw nothing but the door frames and the floor. I stepped over to that spot, pressed my foot down. The floor creaked a bit under my weight. It was an old spot that sometimes made noise, but it usually creaked only when I stepped on it. I knelt down and pressed my hand on the floor. It made the same creak. I stood up and looked around. I listened, holding my breath again. I tried not to imagine anything. I wanted something solid, something I could see or hear clearly. But all I had was a feeling that I wasn't alone. I stepped back into my office and sat down at the desk. I reached for my phone. I considered calling a friend just to talk. I checked the phone's signal. It was normal. I scrolled through my contacts, but I didn't call anyone. I didn't know what I would say. I didn't want to sound paranoid. Instead, I locked my phone screen and placed it on the desk. I tried to focus on my work again, typing slowly, checking numbers, writing some notes. The silence settled back in. Then I heard a low sound from the living room. It was a quiet shuffle, like someone moving a piece of fabric. I stood up immediately, not even pushing my chair back, and walked quickly into the living room. The lamp was still on. The furniture was still in place. I touched the couch cushions. They were warm because I had sat there a few minutes before, but nothing else felt disturbed. I circled the coffee table, checked behind the armchair, looked at the curtains again. Everything was the same. I spoke out loud for the first time. I said, "Hello?" My voice sounded normal, maybe a bit tense. I waited. No answer. I walked around the house, calling out, "Is anyone here?" I kept my voice low. but loud enough that if someone was hiding, they would hear me. I got no response. I decided to check the locks again. Front door locked, back door locked, all windows locked. I tried to open a window just to hear the outside sound. It opened fine. I heard distant traffic. I closed it again. Nothing outside suggested anything unusual. It was just a normal night in my neighborhood. I returned to the office, left the door open, and turned the chair so I could see the hallway as I sat. I wanted to keep an eye on that space. I placed my phone on my lap and kept typing. After a few minutes, I noticed a faint scratch sound on the office door frame. I stood up again and walked over. I examined the wood. There were no fresh marks. I ran my finger along the frame. Smooth. I stepped back into the hallway. Silence. At that point, I felt my stomach tighten. I couldn't relax. My scalp felt tense and my heartbeat was heavy in my chest. I wiped sweat from my forehead. I was breathing through my mouth. I felt a dry sensation in my throat. I swallowed and decided I would not stay in that office any longer. I grabbed my laptop and my phone and went to the living room. I placed my laptop on the coffee table and sat on the couch. I turned the TV on for some background noise. News channel, low volume. Just something to break the silence. I watched the news anchor talk about something boring. I tried to pretend I was just staying up late. After a while, nothing else happened. I sat there for a good 15 minutes, listening to the TV, looking around the room. The lamp lit everything clearly. I tapped my foot on the floor a bit just to feel in control. I told myself that if there was someone inside, they would have revealed themselves by now. I got up, went to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water. I drank it, placed the glass in the sink. I said again, "Hello?" Nothing. I leaned against the counter thinking about what to do next. It was well past midnight now. I felt a little stupid, but I also felt a steady fear. I didn't understand what I had felt on my shoulder. It was too real to dismiss. I decided to try something else. I turned off the living room lamp so the only light came from the TV screen. I stood by the wall, listening. If there was an intruder, maybe I could hear their steps in the dark. I waited in the darkened living room, letting my eyes adjust to the dim light from the TV. I heard the clock ticking in the hallway. I waited, breathing quietly. After a while, I heard a soft thump from the guest room. I moved slowly toward the hallway and flicked on the light. I walked to the guest room door, opened it, and turned on the light inside. Everything looked the same. I checked the closet, under the bed, behind the curtains. Nothing. I stood in the center of the room, feeling a slight tremble in my legs. I heard a faint click sound from the kitchen. I rushed out of the guest room and into the hallway. I moved quickly to the kitchen. The light was still on in there. Nothing had changed. I checked the back door lock again, still locked. Window lock still engaged. I pulled open a few drawers, checked if anything had moved. Everything in its place. My throat felt dry again. I drank another glass of water. I tried to calm my breathing. I walked through the house one more time, room by room, checking every spot. I found nothing. It was all normal. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I kept feeling small chills on my arms and neck. I returned to the couch. I sat with my back against the couch cushions, my eyes on the hallway. I forced myself to watch TV for a while. I changed channels a few times. I settled on some late-night show with people talking about sports. It felt normal and steady. I got up only to use the bathroom, then came back and stayed in the living room with all the lights on. I watched the clock. Hours passed slowly. By the time it was early morning, nothing else had happened. I never saw anyone. I never heard any more taps or scratches. I started to think that maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. I felt tired and tense. My shoulders hurt from sitting so stiffly. I stood up and stretched my arms. My body felt heavy. I decided to go back to my office. The hallway was quiet. My office door was still open. I went inside, sat down, and looked at the papers on my desk. Everything was exactly where I left it. The feeling that started this whole situation seemed distant now. I touched my shoulder, remembering that moment. The feeling had been very real, but I had found no one. I had searched my entire home, turned on every light, and waited for any sign. I got nothing. I saved my work on the computer and closed the documents. I turned off the computer monitor and listened. Just the low hum of the machine, the faint sound of the TV in the other room. My house was quiet. I got up, grabbed my phone, and went to the living room. I left the TV on and just sat there, waiting for the morning light to come through the windows. I felt safer with the TV's low voices. They felt human and ordinary. As I sat there, I looked toward the hallway one more time. No movement, no shadows, no sounds. Eventually, the sky outside started to lighten. I could see a faint gray through the curtains. I stood up and turned off the hallway light. I looked back at my office door and saw nothing but my desk and chair inside. I took a deep breath and let it out slowly. I felt my heart rate settle down. I spent the rest of that early morning on the couch, keeping quiet, half watching the TV, half listening to the silence. Nothing else happened. When the sun finally came up, I felt more grounded. I checked my doors and windows one last time before getting ready for the day. They were still locked. Everything was normal. I ended up leaving for work without any clear answers, but I know what I felt that night. I felt something tap my shoulder. I don't know what it was and I didn't see anyone, but I know what happened. It still bothers me, but I have no proof. I was alone, and there was nothing else I could do. I knew something was off on my first night in that new place. I remember sitting on the old couch in the living room, trying to relax after unpacking my kitchen boxes, when I noticed a low, steady sound coming from the end of the hallway. It sounded like a faint hum or chant. It was quiet. I could barely hear it. I stopped what I was doing to listen more closely. The sound was coming from the last bedroom at the end of the hall, the one I hadn't put anything in yet. The door was open, and the lights were off. It was just this empty room with bare walls and an uncovered window. There shouldn't have been any noise at all. I got up, walked slowly down the hall, and as soon as I reached the doorway, the sound stopped. There was nothing inside. The room was empty. I stood there for a moment. I looked at the corners, the ceiling, the wooden floor. I looked out the window. I saw the neighbor's fence and the dim lights of the houses across the street. I heard nothing but the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen behind me. I went back to the living room and tried to forget about it. I assumed I must have been hearing something outside. Maybe a radio from a nearby house or someone talking out on the sidewalk. But when I settled down again, maybe 10 minutes later, I heard that low hum again. It was the same tone, the same feeling of soft chanting or murmuring. I couldn't make out words. It just sounded like a human voice humming something repetitive and quiet, like someone trying not to be heard. I got up again, moving quietly this time. The hallway was dark because the only light on was the one in the living room. I walked slowly, my socks brushing the floor. I tried not to make any noise. As I approached the room, the sound kept going until I reached the threshold. The instant I stepped inside, the hum vanished. I turned on the ceiling light. I checked every corner. I looked behind the door and out the window again. Empty, silent. I was alone. I felt a prickling on my skin, like a light sweat forming on my forehead. There was no reason for that sound. The house was older, but not ancient. It had been renovated a few years back, according to the landlord. The walls were not thin. I didn't see any cracks or openings where someone outside could whisper through. I went to the other empty bedroom, opened its closet, checked under its window. I listened at the walls. Nothing. I tried to ignore it. That night I slept in my own bedroom with the door closed. My bedroom was next to the kitchen, far from that empty room. I kept thinking I would hear that sound again, but I was tired and eventually fell asleep without hearing anything else. The next day I worked on setting up my desk in my home office. I work from home, so I spent the afternoon arranging my computer and sorting out my internet connection. Everything felt normal during the day. It was actually a quiet neighborhood, no traffic noise, just a few birds outside, the buzz of my computer, and the occasional bark from a dog down the street. I went to that empty bedroom a few times during the day, trying to see if anything looked strange. It was just a normal room. The walls were painted white. The window faced the front yard. The floor was wooden and had no rugs yet. It was just an empty space. There were no hidden doors or loose floorboards. I tapped on the walls a bit, trying to see if there were hollow spots. Everything sounded solid. That night, after dinner, I sat in the living room again. I left the door of the empty bedroom open. I sat there, in silence with the TV off, just to see if I would hear it again. It took about an hour, but then I caught it. A low, steady humming sound, like a voice without words, coming from that room at the end of the hall. I felt a chill. My heart started beating faster. I stood up slowly. This time, I didn't walk straight there. I tried stepping lightly on the floor, making almost no sound. I wanted to catch it still humming. As I got closer, it kept going. I reached the doorway and I heard it more clearly. It was definitely a human voice. It was a calm, steady hum. The pitch was low. I tried to peer in without stepping inside. I leaned my head past the doorframe to see into the room, but there was no one. The window was shut. The floor was empty. Then I took one step in, and instantly, it stopped. I felt the hair on my arms stand up. I checked behind the door again. I looked at the ceiling. I even opened the window to see if someone was standing outside. Nothing. The street outside was empty, just a couple of parked cars and a dim porch light across the street. I closed the window and went back to the living room. I sat down again, thinking maybe I should record this. I took out my phone, opened a recording app, and waited. About 30 minutes later, I heard it again. This time I started recording immediately. I held my phone in my hand, got up slowly, and crept toward the room. I kept the phone aimed forward. The voice kept humming until I reached the doorway. The moment I leaned in, silence. I stopped the recording and played it back. Nothing. Just my own breathing and some background hiss. I didn't pick up the sound. I cursed under my breath and felt a tension in my neck. I paced around the hallway, flicking the hall light on and off. I tried standing outside the empty bedroom for a long time, listening. Nothing happened when I waited right outside. The sound only started when I went back to the living room or the kitchen. It was as if it needed some distance from me. That night I tried a different approach. I left my phone inside the empty bedroom with the recording app running, and I walked away. I went to my bedroom, closed the door, and waited. About an hour later, I walked back to retrieve the phone. I stopped at the doorway first to listen. Nothing. I stepped inside and it was silent. I grabbed the phone and checked the recording. I heard a faint hum in the background for a few seconds around the middle of the recording, but it was very quiet and cut off suddenly. No clear pattern, no voice that I could identify as male or female, just a low hum. I listened to it again and again, and it always sounded the same. Just a few seconds of humming, and then nothing. Over the next few days, I started feeling uneasy in my own home. I found myself avoiding the hallway at night. I tried to focus on my work and my daily routine. I made sure I had music playing during the evenings. Sometimes I wore headphones to distract myself, but sooner or later, when I turned off the music or tried to watch TV quietly, I would hear that humming coming from the empty bedroom. I tried knocking on the wall of the hallway while the humming was happening. It stopped immediately. I tried calling out, asking if anyone was there. No response. I checked the attic. Just an empty space with insulation and no sign of animals. I checked the crawl space under the house. I found some old pipes and wiring. Nothing unusual. I got a stepladder and looked closely at the ceiling of the empty bedroom. There were no vents, no hidden speakers. The electrical wiring was simple. The window frame was solid. The closet was just a shallow space with no secret panel. I started to sleep with the TV on in my bedroom so I wouldn't have to listen. It helped a bit, But some nights I turned the volume down on the TV just to see if the humming was still there. It always was. It never became louder, never changed pitch, just a steady low hum stopping the second I tried to step inside that room. One night, I tried another experiment. I placed a cheap baby monitor set that I had bought a long time ago. I didn't have kids, I just thought it might be useful for security. Inside the empty bedroom. I put the receiver in the living room. At first, I heard only static. I waited. Eventually, the humming started. I leaned closer to the receiver, and I could hear it through the device. It was clearer now, like a voice humming a short sequence of notes. I rushed down the hallway with the receiver in my hand. The humming cut out before I got close. When I checked the transmitter device inside the room, it was untouched. I started feeling anxious whenever evening came. My appetite got worse. I felt tired and nervous. I thought about calling the landlord, but what would I say? That I was hearing some humming in the empty bedroom that vanished every time I checked? He'd think I was imagining things. I considered calling a friend over, but I was embarrassed. Plus, I didn't want to drag anyone else into this weird situation. I tried sleeping in the empty bedroom one night just to see what would happen. I put a sleeping bag on the floor. I turned off all the lights and lay there in the dark, waiting. The house was quiet. After a long time, I started to doze off. Then I heard the humming again. It sounded distant now, like it was coming from somewhere else. But it was definitely the same sound. I sat up. The humming stopped immediately. I waited, breathing hard, my skin damp with sweat. I could smell the dust of the wooden floor. The room felt cold. I waited for hours, but it didn't start again as long as I stayed inside. The next day, I felt drained. I was annoyed and angry. I tried talking out loud in the empty bedroom, saying that I didn't want any trouble, that I just wanted to live in peace. I didn't expect any answer, and I got none. It was still just a room, bare and quiet. After 2 weeks, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided I had to do something more drastic. I borrowed a friend's handheld tape recorder. It was an old device, something that could pick up sound differently than my phone. I set it up in the hallway outside the empty bedroom, recording nonstop, and I stayed in the living room. I kept the TV off and the lights dim. The humming started again. I could hear it clearly from where I sat. I waited a few minutes to make sure it was steady. Then I crept down the hallway and slowly moved the tape recorder closer. As soon as I got near the door, it stopped. When I played back the tape, I got a few seconds of the humming, but it was faint. I tried leaving the house late at night, standing in the front yard to see if I could hear it through the open window. I opened the window of the empty bedroom and stood outside with the baby monitor receiver. I heard nothing. Only when I went back inside and settled in the living room did it start again. The humming was always inside, always from that room, and always gone as soon as I approached. I felt stuck. I didn't want to move out again. I had just settled in, paid deposits, connected utilities, but I started avoiding nights in the living room. I spent more time in my bedroom with music playing. Still, I was curious. One evening, I tried sneaking up from the kitchen side, walking slowly, crouching low, trying not to cast a shadow. The humming continued until the moment I peeked inside. Then silence. I never got used to it. Every time I heard it, I felt my heart thump harder. My hands got clammy. My breathing turned shallow. I thought about putting furniture in that room, maybe turning it into a storage space or a guest room, but I didn't want to spend time in there. The thought of arranging furniture while that strange humming might start and stop behind my back made me feel sick. Eventually, I started wearing earplugs at night. I turned on a fan in my bedroom so I wouldn't hear it. Some nights I managed to ignore it. Other nights I gave in to my curiosity and stepped out into the hallway. It was always the same pattern. Hum when I'm away, silence when I get close. I never found a source. I never found a speaker or a hidden device. I never saw anyone inside the room. I tried calling out, "If someone is there, say something." No words, just humming when I wasn't looking. I tried shining a flashlight through the doorway from a distance. I saw nothing. I moved in a small chair and placed it against the wall, facing the door, hoping to trick whoever or whatever it was. But it didn't help. In the end, I just learned to live with it. I avoided spending quiet evenings in the living room. I played music or kept the TV loud. Sometimes I left the house after dark, going for a drive just to avoid the tension. When I came back late, I went straight to my bedroom. In the morning, everything felt normal again. The empty room was just a room with four walls and a window. No stains, no marks, no strange smells. To this day, I don't know what caused that humming. I never caught it red-handed, so to speak. It was always careful, always silent when I was near. It never got louder. It never tried to scare me directly. It never showed any sign that it was aware of me as a person. It just existed in that empty space at night, humming softly, then disappearing the moment I tried to confront it. I still live here. The humming continues sometimes. I've stopped trying to explain it. I just keep my distance and live my life. That's all I can do. I sat down on my couch late in the evening after a long day. I needed to send a quick voice message to a friend. I picked up my phone, hit the record button, and spoke for maybe 20 seconds, just telling him that I was running late on something and would catch up tomorrow. There was nothing unusual in the room. My apartment was quiet. The windows were closed. I was alone, and it was just a quick message. When I played it back to check if my voice was clear enough, I noticed something strange behind my own words. There was another voice, very faint, whispering something I couldn't understand. I paused the playback and stared at the phone screen. I thought I must have picked up some random noise from the street, but I'd been sitting right in the middle of the living room, and everything was silent. The windows were shut. The TV was off. The ceiling fan was on low, making a slight hum, but that was it. I pressed play again and listened carefully. My voice sounded normal, a little tired, but behind it I heard this soft, low whisper, almost like a breathy mumble. It didn't sound like interference, it sounded like a voice, but I couldn't make out any words. I felt my face get warm. I held my breath and played it again. My own words were, "Hey man, I'm just checking in, I'll send you the details tomorrow." And over that, faintly, something like, I couldn't tell if it was male or female. It was too quiet. I tried increasing the volume. I heard my own voice get louder, but the whisper still stayed distant, like it was behind a wall. I listened maybe 5 times in a row. Each time I felt a small chill on the back of my neck. My apartment was still dead quiet. I glanced around. The kitchen light was off. The hallway was dim. No one else was there. I decided to record another message. I didn't say anything too meaningful, I just said, "Testing," and then stayed silent for a few seconds before stopping the recording. I played it back. My voice came through, "Testing," and then total silence. No whisper. I told myself I must have imagined it the first time. Then I went back to the original message. The whisper was still there. I tried sending it to my friend. I wrote a quick text telling him to listen and asked if he heard anything weird. He didn't reply right away, and I felt stupid sitting there waiting for him to say something. I got up, turned on the kitchen light, and walked around. I checked the windows. They were all closed. My apartment was on the 3rd floor, facing a quiet courtyard. No one should be outside whispering. My heart was beating a little faster for no good reason. I took a drink of water, leaning against the kitchen counter. I tried to think of a logical explanation. Maybe my phone microphone picked up some electronic interference. Maybe the phone's speaker was acting up. I decided to try another test. I made a new recording. This is a second test. I'm alone. I'm just testing my phone. I paused, then ended the recording. I played it back. Perfectly normal. No whisper. I sat down again on the couch, put my phone on the coffee table, and went back to the first recording. The whisper was still there. I took a pair of headphones out of the drawer and plugged them into the phone's jack. I listened through the headphones to be sure. This time with the headphones, the whisper seemed a bit clearer, but still impossible to understand. I could hear soft breaths, like someone standing just behind me, speaking too quietly to catch the words. I turned around. No one. I felt the hairs on my arms stand up. I got up and checked the bedroom and bathroom. I opened the closet. Nothing. No sign of anyone. I don't live with anyone. There's no roommate. I was alone. I tried to ignore it. I went to the kitchen and made myself a quick snack. A sandwich. I didn't feel hungry, but I needed to do something normal. I ate standing up, looking around my quiet apartment. Everything seemed normal. The fridge hummed softly. The overhead light buzzed a little. Outside I couldn't hear much. Maybe a distant car, but no voices, no whispering. My phone buzzed. It was my friend. He sent me a text. I hear something weird in the background. What the hell is that? I felt my stomach tighten, so I wasn't imagining it. Someone else could hear it too. I typed back, I don't know. I was alone. He replied with a voice message. I played it. Dude, that's creepy. It sounds like someone is whispering. Are you sure no one was there? His voice was steady, but I could tell he was a bit freaked out too. I decided to try to replicate it again. I sat in the same spot, turned off the fan, and recorded the same phrase I said the first time. Hey man, I'm just checking in. I'll send you the details tomorrow. I tried to speak in the same tone. I pressed stop and played it. Nothing but my voice. Totally normal. I tried again. I repeated the phrase a third time. Just my voice. No whisper. I went back to the first recording and played it again. The whisper was still there. It hadn't gone away. It was as if it was burned into that first message. I tried editing the file on my phone, trying to isolate the sound. I replayed it over and over. I tried holding the phone against my ear. I could almost feel my pulse in my head as I listened, straining to catch a single word. It was just a soft hissing like, but it definitely sounded like speech, not static. I felt a drop of sweat run down my back. My shirt clung to my skin. I realized I was breathing a bit faster than normal. I walked over to the front door and looked through the peephole. The hallway outside was quiet. The faint glow of the corridor light was still. No sounds. I opened the door and stepped into the hallway. No one was around. I stood there for a moment, listening. Nothing but silence. I went back inside and locked the door. I checked every room again. I stood in the center of the bedroom looking at my phone. I recorded another message there, just saying something meaningless. Played it back. Nothing strange. I moved to the bathroom, tried the same test. Nothing strange. I ended up sitting at my desk in the corner of the living room, opening a sound editing app and loading that first voice message. I tried playing with the equalizer. If I increased the volume of the lower frequencies, I could hear a soft, raspy voice. If I increased the higher frequencies, it became more like a hiss. It never turned into clear words. I texted my friend the edited version. He wrote back, "This is messed up. Maybe your phone is broken." I grabbed an old phone from a drawer, a spare I kept for emergencies. I turned it on, recorded myself speaking the same phrase, and played it back. Nothing weird. I transferred the original voice message to that old phone just out of curiosity. I listened on the old device. The whisper was still there, so it wasn't the phone's hardware. The recording itself contained that voice. I couldn't explain it. I felt a pressure in my chest. I rubbed my eyes and took a deep breath. I needed to calm down. I tried calling my friend. I told him again that I was alone in the apartment when I recorded the message. He believed me, but he didn't have any explanation. He said it might be some weird audio glitch. I said that didn't make sense. He didn't know what else to say. We hung up, and I sat there alone again. I decided to record silence. I opened the recording app and hit record without speaking. I kept quiet for about 15 seconds. When I played it back, I heard nothing but silence. I tried it again, this time standing where I was originally sitting. Again, silence. I repeated the original message one more time. Again, it was normal. That whisper never appeared again in any new recording. It was only in that first one. I felt a mix of relief and confusion. If it wasn't happening again, maybe I could forget about it. I tried to move on. I turned on the TV, watched some random show, and tried to relax. But after a while, I kept picking up my phone and listening to that first voice message. I didn't know why I couldn't let it go. Something about it felt wrong. I turned the TV's volume off and listened again. The whisper sounded like it was behind my own voice, as if someone had leaned over my shoulder as I spoke. I got up and stood in that exact spot. I faced the direction I had been facing. I looked around. There was nothing special about that spot. Just my couch, my coffee table, and the TV stand. I paced around the apartment. I tried checking all my electronics. My laptop was in the bedroom, closed. My tablet was off. My smart speaker was unplugged. I wondered if some random radio frequency got caught in the recording, but I had never heard of something like that happening in such a realistic way. I stepped out onto my small balcony and recorded something, just a test. Outside I could hear distant traffic. When I played it back, it sounded exactly as expected. No whisper, nothing strange. I stepped inside again and closed the balcony door. I pulled down the blinds. I recorded another test message in the living room. Totally normal. I looked at the clock. It was getting late. I couldn't shake off the nervous feeling. My throat felt dry. I turned on all the lights in the apartment. I walked from room to room, looking behind curtains, checking under the bed, opening cabinets. I felt silly, but I did it anyway. There was nowhere for anyone to hide. I was completely alone. I wondered if my apartment's walls were thin. Could I have picked up a neighbor's voice somehow? Maybe someone was whispering next door at that exact moment. I pressed my ear to the wall. I could hear a very faint TV sound from somewhere else in the building, but not close. I tapped the wall. Solid. I never heard my neighbors talk in a whisper before, at least not so clearly. And I didn't record for long. The timing would have had to be perfect. I sat down at my desk and wrote a note on a piece of paper. First recording, whisper present. Subsequent recordings, no whisper. Old phone test, whisper present on original file. Outside test, normal. Whisper never appeared again. I had no answers. I tapped my foot on the floor. My legs felt tense. I realized I was sweating again. My fingertips felt cold. Every time I played that file, the whisper gave me this uneasy feeling, like I wasn't alone, even though I was. I tried turning on some music for a while. I listened to a couple of songs, hoping to distract myself. It didn't help much. Eventually, I decided to try sleeping. I went to the bedroom, got ready for bed, and turned off the lights. The darkness made me feel uneasy. After a few minutes, I got up, turned the lights back on, and closed the bedroom door. I left the hallway light on. I didn't like the idea of lying in the dark alone, knowing that weird whisper existed on my phone. I sat in bed with the phone in my hand. I pressed play one last time. My voice. "Hey man, I'm just checking in. I'll send you the details tomorrow." And right after I said, "checking in," the whisper came through. It was so quiet I could barely hear it, but it was there. It sounded like someone breathing out a few syllables. Maybe it was saying my name, or maybe it was just nonsense. I couldn't tell. I tried covering my other ear to focus on the sound. It didn't help. It stayed incomprehensible. I closed my eyes and thought about what to do. I had no plan. I was just stuck with this weird recording. Maybe I could delete it and pretend it never happened. But I knew I'd never forget it. I decided to send the file to another friend, just to get a second opinion. He was offline, so he wouldn't reply right away. I sent it anyway. Then I plugged my phone in to charge and placed it on the nightstand. I got up and checked the front door lock one more time. I made sure the windows were secure. I looked behind the shower curtain. I felt stupid, but I just had to be sure. All clear. I finally turned off the hallway light and got back into bed. My body felt tense. My heart was beating a little faster than normal. I closed my eyes and tried to breathe slowly, thinking that I needed sleep. I couldn't sleep well. I kept thinking I heard something. I sat up a couple of times, holding my breath, listening for anything strange, but the apartment stayed quiet. Eventually, I got tired enough that I started drifting. My head felt heavy, and my eyelids were sore. I didn't hear anything in the room, just the low hum of the fridge in the kitchen and the faint tick of the wall clock. I guess I managed to fall asleep at some point. When I woke up in the morning, the first thing I did was check my phone. I played the recording again. The whisper was still there, unchanged. I tried making a fresh recording in the morning light, just to see if anything weird happened now. It didn't. It was just my voice and silence. I ended up leaving my apartment for a while, going for a walk around the block. I grabbed a coffee and tried not to think about it. But the memory stuck with me. That one strange whisper on one random recording. I couldn't explain it. My friend didn't have any answers. No one did. It was just there, a piece of recorded sound I could not understand. When I got back to my place, everything looked the same, but I felt different. I kept my phone away for a while, not wanting to hear it again. I knew it was still there, waiting, but I didn't know what else to do, so I just went on with my day. I remember it started on a Monday night. It was about 2 a.m. when I first noticed the apartment next door. The door was closed as usual. There was no noise. I had just gotten up to get some water. Everything was quiet in my own place. My kitchen light was on low because I hate walking around in total darkness. As I passed my living room window, I saw a flicker in the apartment across the narrow courtyard. It was a quick series of flashes. It came from a window on the same floor, just one unit over. It looked like a lamp turning on and off in a strange, uneven pattern. I stood there watching, a bit confused but not too worried. Eventually it stopped, and I went back to bed. The next night I saw it again. Same time, same weird flickering of the lights. It didn't look like someone casually flipping a switch. It wasn't a steady rhythm. Sometimes it blinked twice, sometimes 3 times, then paused, then flashed again. I was curious, but I didn't want to bother anyone that late. Maybe the neighbor had some electrical problem or was testing something. I tried to fall asleep, telling myself it was none of my business. This went on for almost a week. Each night, around the same hour, the lights in that apartment would flicker. I could see it through the window that faced my living room. I never heard any voices. I never saw anyone's silhouette. I never caught a glimpse of anyone moving behind the glass. Just that strange pulsing glow, like someone was messing with the lights. My curiosity grew. I didn't know the neighbor well. Actually, I didn't know them at all. We weren't a friendly building. People here kept to themselves. I never ran into anyone from that unit in the hallway or the elevator. Still, I planned to ask around. On Saturday morning, I decided to talk to the landlord. I didn't want to go straight to the neighbor. I figured I should find out if someone actually lived there. Maybe it was a vacant unit. The building wasn't fully occupied. Some apartments stayed empty for months. The landlord's office was on the ground floor. I found him fixing a mailbox. I asked if he knew the person in apartment 304, the one next to mine on the opposite side of the courtyard. He looked at me and frowned. He said apartment 304 had been empty for a while. He was sure no one lived there. He told me the last tenant left 3 months ago. He said they were trying to find a new tenant, but no one had signed a lease yet. I told him that was strange because I'd been seeing lights at night. He shrugged. He said maybe it was a reflection from somewhere else or a malfunction in the wiring. He didn't seem worried. I asked if we could check the place. He sighed and said he didn't have time right now, but we could look into it next week. I left feeling uneasy. If no one lived there, who was turning the lights on and off? That night I stayed up on purpose. I turned off my TV and all the lights in my apartment except for a small lamp in my bedroom. I stood at my window and waited. Around 2 a.m., it started again. The apartment 304's window lit up with that strange flicker. I watched carefully. The pattern didn't look random this time. It paused now and then, as if waiting. My heart was beating fast. My mouth felt dry. I leaned forward, pressing my forehead against the glass. There was no other movement, just the flashes of light. I decided to do something. I put on some pants and a jacket and stepped out into the hallway. My apartment and 304 were separated by a few units, a small walk down the corridor. The hallway was quiet. The carpeted floor muffled my footsteps. The lights overhead were dim, as usual. I stood in front of 304's door. I could see light seeping from under it. It flickered and stopped, then flickered again. I felt a tightness in my chest. I reached out and knocked softly. There was no answer. I knocked again, harder this time. Nothing. The light continued to flash inside. I leaned close to the door. I didn't hear anything. No shuffling, no breathing, no music or TV. Nothing. Just silence, and that weird flicker visible under the door. I tried the handle. It was locked, of course. I stood there for a long moment, my heart pounding, feeling a cold sweat forming on my neck. Finally, I backed away and returned to my apartment. The light continued for another few minutes, then stopped. I hardly slept that night. The next day, I managed to catch the landlord in the afternoon. I told him about the flickering again and insisted we check the apartment together. He seemed irritated, but agreed to come with me. We took the elevator to the 3rd floor. It was around noon. We stood outside 304 and he used his master key to open the door. Inside, the apartment was empty. No furniture, no lamps, no personal items. Just a bare living room, a kitchen with empty counters, and a bedroom without a bed. The overhead light was a standard ceiling fixture. The landlord flipped the switch. The light came on, steady and normal. No flickering. I looked around carefully. The floor was dusty in places. The windows were closed. The electrical outlets were empty. The landlord pointed at the ceiling light. He said it looked normal to him. The bulb was a regular bulb. He flicked it on and off a few times. Nothing strange. I tried to explain what I had seen. He said maybe I was seeing some reflection from the building next door. Maybe there was a sign or something outside, bouncing light around. I shook my head and told him the pattern came from inside this unit. He shrugged. We locked up and left. That night, I watched again from my apartment. At 2 a.m., the flicker was back. I could see it clearly. I knew no one was inside. I had been in there just hours before. I could feel my stomach knotting up. My hands shook a little. I tried to think logically. Maybe there was a short in the wiring that only happened late at night. Maybe a loose connection in the building's electrical system caused the bulb to flash. But why only that apartment? And why in such irregular patterns? I decided to try something else. I turned off all my lights and watched carefully. When the flicker started, I tried waving my hand in front of my eyes, tried moving side to side to see if it was some trick of the reflection. It always looked the same. A few flashes, a pause, a few more flashes, another pause. I pressed my ear against the wall that separated my living room from the hallway, then from there to 304. I couldn't hear anything unusual, just the faint hum of my refrigerator behind me and my own breathing. I felt sweat gathering under my arms. My neck felt stiff. My pulse was fast. I stepped away from the wall, paced around my apartment, and thought about calling the police. But what would I say? I saw flickering lights in an empty apartment. They would probably think I was imagining it. I tried another approach. The next morning, I asked a neighbor who lived a floor below if they'd noticed anything strange. They said no. They seemed a bit suspicious of my question. They didn't want to get involved. I didn't insist. That night, I placed a chair in my hallway right in front of my apartment door. I left my door slightly open so I could peek through the gap and see if anyone approached 304. It was a bit ridiculous, but I wanted to be sure. Around 1:30 a.m., I sat there quietly, listening. The hallway smelled like old carpet and cleaning chemicals. The overhead lights buzzed softly. No one passed by. Then at 2 a.m., I saw the light flicker under the door of 304 again. I felt my heart pounding. I swallowed hard and stood up. I took a few steps toward 304 and stopped. The light was still flickering inside. I tried the door handle again. Locked. I pressed my ear against it. No sound. Just that dim, uneven glow under the door. I felt a chill on my arms and a tightness in my throat. My breathing got faster. I turned and went back to my apartment. I closed and locked my door and stood with my back against it, breathing heavily. Eventually, I tried to sleep. For the next few nights, I didn't even look at the window. I tried to ignore it, but it kept happening. Every time I got up, I'd see that flicker in the corner of my eye. I couldn't relax. I felt like my apartment wasn't safe. I started jumping at small noises. I'd wake up sweating. My eyes were getting red from lack of sleep. I couldn't focus on normal things like reading or watching TV. My mind kept drifting back to that flicker. I decided to bring it up with the landlord again. We stood in the hallway outside 304 the next afternoon. I told him it happened every night. He looked annoyed. He said he'd call an electrician to check the wiring. The electrician came the following day in the late morning. They checked the fuse box, the wiring inside 304, and found nothing wrong. The electrician said everything looked standard. No faulty switches, no damaged fixtures, no strange power surges. I felt stupid standing there while they shrugged at me. That night, I tried filming it. I set up my phone at the window and pressed record. At 2 a.m., the flicker started. I watched it happen right in front of me. The flashes lit up the opposite window. After it stopped, I checked the footage. Nothing. Just darkness. The video didn't show any flicker at all. It was like the camera didn't pick it up. I tried turning my phone off and on. I tried again the next night with a different angle. Same result. The camera showed no flicker. This made my skin crawl. I saw it with my own eyes. Why couldn't I capture it on camera? My stomach felt tight all the time. My shoulders ached from tension. I gripped my armrests too hard when I sat down. My thoughts raced. I kept looking at the clock near midnight, dreading that 2 a.m. flicker. I tried earplugs even though the flicker was silent. I tried closing my blinds, but I knew it was still happening. Even if I didn't see it, I knew it was there. A week later, the landlord knocked on my door in the late afternoon. He asked if the flickering was still happening. I said yes. He sighed and said we should try checking the apartment at night. I agreed. I felt relieved that someone else wanted to see it. So at 1:50 a.m. that night, we met in the hallway. It was quiet and cold. I rubbed my arms. The landlord looked tired but determined. We waited. At exactly 2 a.m., we saw the flicker under the door. The landlord whispered that he would open the door. He used his master key. We stepped in. It was dark. The landlord flipped the ceiling light switch. The light came on steady. No flicker. The room was empty. I could smell dust in the air. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear my pulse in my ears. The landlord looked around, checked the bedroom, the bathroom. Nothing. No lamps, no devices, no sign of anyone. We turned off the light and stepped back into the hallway. After a few seconds, we saw a flicker again through the still open door. We rushed back in, turned on the light, and it was normal. No flicker. We stepped out and locked the door. The landlord wiped sweat from his forehead. He didn't say much. He looked pale. After that night, the landlord said he would have the wiring checked again. I never heard back about any results. A few days passed without any flickering. I almost relaxed. Then one night, it started again, but only for a brief moment. I didn't bother the landlord this time. I didn't try to film it. I just stood there and watched. It flickered a few times and stopped. Over the next several days, it appeared less and less. Some nights, nothing happened. Other nights, I'd catch a glimpse, but it would vanish as soon as I focused on it. I spent my evenings watching my clock, listening to my own breathing, waiting for something that sometimes didn't come. My hands were always tense. My eyes felt dry. I drank water constantly because my mouth felt sticky. A couple of weeks later, the flickering stopped completely. No more strange patterns. No more lights under the door. The apartment remained empty. The landlord didn't mention it again. The electrician never returned. The neighbors never brought it up. I slowly got back to normal. I started sleeping better. I still looked at that window at 2 a.m. sometimes, but everything stayed dark. I never figured it out. I don't know what caused that flickering or why it stopped. I don't know why it never showed up on camera or why the landlord and I saw it but couldn't find a cause. I still live here, and apartment 304 is still empty. When I pass by it, I remember that strange light. My heart still speeds up a little, and I hurry back to my own door. I guess some things happen and we never find out why. All I know is that I saw it, and it felt real, and I'm not going to forget it.